Chapter 1. A person's life came in many different forms. Everyone's life was different, but if one thought about it carefully, they would all be similar. It was like fate's joke. However, fate would often play a little joke on people. The sun slowly rose and sunlight shone on every corner of the earth. A new day had begun and people began to move. In an ordinary house, a teenager who looked to be about 16 or 17 years old pressed the buzzing alarm. He sat up and paused quietly. A few minutes later he got out of bed. He first washed up and quickly made breakfast. After finishing breakfast he packed his bag, put on his school uniform, took the key, locked the door and left. The teenager's name was Wuming. Because he was an orphan, he was picked up by the director of an orphanage who did not know how to give names. Coincidentally, the director's surname was Wu, so he was given such a strange name. However, Wuming was not famous when he was young, but in the process of growing up, Wuming became a problematic child. Fortunately, there was a decent director of an orphanage who took him in and taught him. Other than being a little mischievous, Wuming could be considered a normal person. The director of the orphanage was a lonely old man. When he adopted Wuming, he was 70 years old. He let Wuming go to school before he was old enough to go to school. Until now, Wuming was 16 years old and was in his third year of high school. However, not long ago the director of the orphanage passed away at the age of 86. Wuming did not cry when the director passed away. Many people were surprised by this, but in reality this was not the case. Before the director passed away, he had spent some time alone with Wuming. People thought that this was to give him his last inheritance. The director did indeed give Wuming something, a jade pendant amulet. However, most importantly, the director said to him, "I know that your heart is not bad. I cannot give you fatherly or motherly love, but you are a strong child. No matter what path you take in the future, I hope that you will not forget your own heart. Don't cry for me after I leave." Due to the old principal's teachings and his own reasons, Wuming's heart was tougher and stronger than the average person. Because of this toughness, Wuming did not cry. However, if one were to observe closely, they would notice that after the old principal's death, Wuming's entire personality was exceptionally gloomy, just like an injured beast. Due to the upcoming college entrance examination, Wuming's gloominess had almost disappeared. A year ago, the old dean had said that he wanted to see Wuming get into a good university. The old dean did not have the chance, but Wuming still remembered that the college entrance examination was in a week's time. However, Wuming's heart did not waver. To be precise, it was because Wuming was too smart. When Wuming was first picked up by the old principal, the number of times he cried and threw tantrums was obviously much less than other children his age. No, it was terrifyingly little. During the period when Wuming was growing up, the old principal had discovered Wuming's talent when Wuming was 3 years old. The old principal had bought some preschool education books, and in just a year, the old principal had discovered that Wuming's knowledge was comparable to that of a second-grade elementary school student. Therefore, the old principal had used some legal means to send little Wuming to a local primary school. He had even specifically instructed little Wuming not to appear too smart. Because little Wuming was a problematic child, although little Wuming was always first in his exams and did not appear on the news, he was still known as a problematic child prodigy by the locals. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. The college entrance examination was over, and the results were out. Wuming was undoubtedly the top scorer in the college entrance examination. Just like that, on the day little Wuming received his acceptance letter, he packed his luggage and boarded the train to the capital. However, when the train arrived at the station, no one noticed that there was actually one less person on the train. In a dark tunnel filled with dazzling starlight, a young man was slowly floating in an unknown direction. Wuming opened his eyes and looked at the space-time tunnel that was filled with flowing light. His eyes were filled with curiosity and excitement. After a while, a low moan sounded. "Am I not human?" Wuming said indifferently. "That's right." Wuming was actually not human but a creature born from the roots, the root dragon. In fact, the jade amulet that the old principal had given Wuming on the day of his death contained a scale. This scale was the key to unlocking Wuming's identity. This key conveyed information to Wuming in the form of dreams when he slept at night. In the dark vortex, a faint light was scooped up by a great power. After signing a contract, it was sent to another world. After that, the light turned into a baby and floated in front of the old principal's door. The child held a pale golden scale in his hand. When the old principal picked up the child and touched the scale, the old principal received the message of Wuming's birth stored in the scale. As a modern atheist, the scene just now had a considerable impact on the old principal. However, this did not affect the old principal's decision to take in Wuming. After taking in Wuming for some time, he realized that the scale seemed to receive the message no matter who touched it. Therefore, the old principal learned the technique of making amulets and wrapped the dragon scale in artificial jade to make it into an amulet. It was also because he knew about Wuming's identity that the old principal did not express any opinion about Wuming's inhuman talent. He even specifically reminded Wuming not to appear too smart. Although Wuming did not like to talk and did not have many facial expressions, this did not mean that Wuming had a personality flaw. Well, it was just a little. This was the price of being born from the roots in exchange for unparalleled talent. Wuming knew that as a higher and more mysterious being, he could not live in a world without any mysteries. In the end, Wuming decided to leave the world that raised him. And the way to leave was through Wuming's contract with a greater power. Simply speaking, Wuming had signed a contract with the restraining power of the M-shaped moon world. However, this was not the case. Wuming was still connected to the roots. This root was not the same as the one that was connected to Wuming was the common root of all worlds, known as the greater root. The root of the M-shaped moon world was merely a lower product of the greater root, known as the lesser root. If not for an accident, Wuming should have been an origin dragon born in the greater root, but he was born in the M-shaped moon world's root. This way, the restraining power of the M-shaped moon world could be said to have picked up a bargain. For Wuming, whether he was born in the greater root or the lesser root, the nature was the same. This was because the greater and lesser roots originated from the same root, so it would not affect Wuming himself. If there was an effect, it would be that the birthplace was different. Now, Wuming was heading towards the M-shaped moon world, which was the world he was born in. Because he was not familiar with the space-time tunnel, Wuming lightly touched a bright spot on the tunnel wall. Instantly, Wuming disappeared. Chapter 2. After being sucked into the space-time tunnel, Wuming fainted. When he woke up, he found himself lying on the ground, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that Wuming was shocked when he saw the sky. The sky was gray, just like the kingdom of the dead, Wuming said slowly. Seems like you have good eyesight, a female voice said. Wuming turned his head and saw an extremely beautiful woman. She looked to be around 20 years old. Her body was wrapped in a black and purple tight suit. Very few parts of her body were covered in light armor. Her purple hair reached her waist and swayed in the wind. She slowly walked towards Wuming step by step. You're clearly a living person, yet you've entered the country of shadows. Seriously. As if she had noticed something amiss, her purple eyes focused and looked carefully. Smiling, she said, "So that's how it is. An origin dragon? It seems that even the heavens are helping me. May I ask where this is? And who are you?" Out of caution, Wuming was very polite, but he didn't let his guard down just because the other party was a woman. "Yes, although she's very beautiful." "Oh, you seem to have accidentally barged in. Origin dragon, don't you know me?" she said. Seems like she's a big shot, Wuming thought. "I'm sorry, I really don't know how I got in and I don't know who you are. Then from today onwards you are my first disciple. I am Skaha, the queen of the demonic realm, the gatekeeper of the kingdom of the dead." Skadak. Wuming was shocked. As the top scorer of the college entrance examination, Wuming was naturally well-read. Of course, he knew about the demonic realm, one of the Celtic mythological secret realms. The queen of the demonic realm, the powerful god of war and gatekeeper, Ska. Skaha had a keen eye that could see through the qualities and temperament of others, especially if the other party was mortal or not. It was also because Wuming was the origin dragon that Skaha couldn't see through Wuming's qualities and temperament at first glance. Naturally, he also knew Skaha's sad wish, to let someone else kill her. And as Skaha couldn't find anyone who could kill her, he decided to nurture someone who could kill him. According to what Skaha had said about his first disciple, it seemed that Skaha had just come up with the idea of nurturing someone who could kill him when he met the talented dragon of origins Wuming. Skaha chuckled when he saw the shocked expression on the dragon's face. "It seems that you do know who I am. So, are you willing to be my disciple, weak origin dragon?" "Yes, I'm willing, master." Wuming agreed after thinking for a while. Wuming urgently needed an opportunity to become stronger, and now that there was an opportunity to become stronger in front of him, how could he let it go? Wuming wasn't angry at being called weak. In fact, it was the truth. He was born not long ago, less than 20 years old, and was very weak. He couldn't even perform the most basic of root dragon abilities. He could only transform into human form with the help of suppression. All in all, he was quite weak now. This was also the reason why Wu Ming decided to leave that mysterious world. The greater the danger, the greater the opportunity. In that world, as the Dragon of Origins, Wu Ming couldn't gain any strength. Of course, that was true if his brain wasn't considered as strength. Very well. I believe that if it were you, you would definitely be able to fulfill my wish, Skaha said with a smile. Skaha smiled and said, remember, when you have the ability to kill me, don't hesitate to kill me. This smile made Wu Ming feel very sad. Just like that, the news of the young origin dragon becoming the first disciple of the Queen of the Demonic Realm was spread throughout Celtic by Cuchulainn. The next morning, Wu Ming walked out of a small wooden house and looked at the sky. I'm used to seeing clear skies and white clouds. I'm really not used to such a dark sky. Yesterday, Skaha brought Wu Ming here and said, you can rest for the night. Training will officially begin tomorrow. After that, he didn't care about Wu Ming's feelings and walked away. Seriously, is he too excited because he found a chance to kill me? Wu Ming thought of that poignant smile again. While he was thinking, a spear suddenly fell from the sky and stabbed into the ground in front of Wu Ming. Exclamation point. Wu Ming was so scared that he took a step back. This is. Wu Ming looked at the silver holy spear. The spear emitted holy magic. As the Dragon of Origins, Wu Ming could naturally sense the magic emitted by the spear. Today your mission is to gain the approval of this spear, Skaha said as he walked over from afar. Gaining the approval of the spear doesn't seem to be that easy. Wu Ming thought. This is actually transformed from the core of the Yggdrasil. As I'm used to using spears, I transformed it into a spear. Skaha paused and continued. If you don't want to use a spear, you can change its appearance after you've gained its approval. However, you have to remember that once you've approved of the appearance that you've chosen, it won't change anymore. Instead, it will evolve again and become a relic, the Noble Phantasm. Noble Phantasm. Wu Ming was familiar with this term. When he was born, the dragon scale also transmitted the basic knowledge of the M-shaped moon world to Wu Ming's mind. In the M-shaped moon world, a noble phantasm was the ultimate weapon of a servant. It was the miracle of materialization, the proof of heroism held by the servant, the crystallization of the human's yearning for miracles, and the strongest weapon known as the noble phantasm. It was similar to magic but more advanced as it was a weapon made from the human's imagination. It was the weapon, symbol, and unique skill of a servant. Of course, it was also a good weapon and it could also be a skill. Of course, it was also denied that it was an object that was not refined by the human's imagination. In fact, many noble phantasms were transformed from ordinary soldiers. Other than skill noble phantasms, all kinds of weapon noble phantasms existed before. After being refined by the human's imagination, it became the noble phantasm. All in all, the noble phantasm was the trump card. It was a very effective life-saving method for the young dragon of origins Wu Ming. Now, even if Skaha did not let Wu Ming get the spear, Wu Ming would not agree. Okay, master, watch me. Wu Ming smiled, and there was a hint of vertical pupils faintly appearing in his eyes. Oh, then I'll wait and see, Sira. Because of the name Wu Ming, Skaha thought that Wu Ming equals silence equals silence. Wu Ming emphasized more than once that he was Wu Ming, not silence. God knows why Skaha spoke modern English. Was it because he was outside the timeline so he could speak modern English? By the way, when Skaha and Wu Ming met for the first time, they also spoke modern English. Skaha convinced Wu Ming with the reason that, if we speak ancient Celtic, you definitely won't understand it. It's a weak origin dragon full of modern flavor. Wu Ming took a deep breath and exhaled. He walked forward, held the spear with both hands and closed his eyes. At that moment, there was only one thought in his mind, the path of the strong, I'm coming. Just like that, Wu Ming began to practice. Chapter 3. In the magical realm the sky was still dark, giving people an indescribable feeling. In the silent forest it gave people a sense of oppression. Suddenly there was a rustling sound. Then came the roar of a beast. However, this voice sounded like the desperate cry of a beast on the brink of death. Plop. The corpse of a 5-meter-tall black tiger fell to the ground. A young man stood in front of the tiger's corpse. He brandished his spear and carried it on his back. Phew. I've finally completed the task given to master. This was Wu Ming, who was Baskahar's master. At this time, Wu Ming had been apprenticed to Baskahar for 3 years. 3 years ago, Wu Ming used 7 days to obtain the approval of the Spear of the World Tree and completed the weapon's final form. Because Wu Ming had no prior experience in martial arts, Wu Ming didn't deliberately change the shape of the weapon. It was still a spear. After that, Baskahar focused on Wuming's physical and magical characteristics as the Dragon of Origin and first laid the foundation for Wuming. During this year he also taught Wuming the 18 primordial Lune. As the Dragon of Origin, Wuming had a very high affinity with magical power. In layman's terms, it was a talent for learning magic. What was called magic in other worlds was called magic in the mid-moon world. Magic was a phenomenon that transcended common sense. It's a general term for artificially recreating mysteries and miracles. This was the evaluation of magic. Magic in the mid-moon world was in a more awkward position. The more people knew, the weaker the magic. For example, if everyone knew Fireball, then Fireball could only be used as a flame. If only one person knew Fireball, then he only needed to use a little magic to release a super large fireball that could destroy a village. Of course, the power of the magic was related to the amount of magic used. Wuming used 3 months to completely memorize and master the 18 primordial Lune. He also learned some Celtic language to communicate with the outside world. As for the Lune rune, although Wuming was still not proficient in it, his proficiency in it had already shocked Skaha. As expected of the Dragon of Origins, Skaha had said back then. In the next 2 years, Wuming continued to learn from Skaha's wisdom and martial arts. Apart from spear arts, Wuming also learned how to use other common weapons such as swords, bows and shields. After 3 years, it could be said that Wuming had inherited all of Skaha's skills. Therefore, as his master, Skaha began to assign tasks to Wuming. The first thing Wuming had to face was a black tiger at the magical beast level. It was the corpse from earlier. Wuming glanced at the black tiger's corpse and realized that it had already turned into ashes and disappeared with the wind. As expected, the dead in the kingdom of the dead cannot be completely killed. Of course. The black tiger's corpse seemed to have turned into ashes, but in fact, it had returned to its previous residence. The residents, in the kingdom of the dead, wouldn't die again because they had already died. Of course, if there were methods that targeted the soul or instant death, they could also be killed. Let's go. Wu Ming turned and left as if he was talking to himself or to the others. After a short while, Skaha appeared out of thin air and the surrounding Lune runes disappeared. This was the rune's way of concealing one's aura. Have you discovered me? You're from the Origin, after all. You've grown so much in just 3 years. Not bad, my lovely disciple. Skaha seemed to have thought of something and smiled. Seems like my wish can come true. After that, he arranged a few more runes around himself and disappeared. Master, I'm back. Wuming returned to the place where he had descended. There were already 2 wooden houses built here. Wuming knocked on the door of one of the houses and shouted. Skaha opened the door. As expected of Sira. That magical beast didn't affect you at all, Skaha said with a smile. Of course. I'm the first disciple of the Queen of the Ink Realm. How could that little cat stop me? Wuming pretended to be calm. His expression didn't change at all, but the pride in his voice was obvious. As for the name, Wuming didn't care. He would just treat it as a name from the Celtic region. Alright, come in and eat. I have a task for you after dinner. After that, Skaha turned around and walked into the house. Although Skaha was his master, he felt more like a big sister to Wuming. Wuming had a rare smile on his face. In a forest, Wuming carried his luggage and held the spear of the world tree. He looked up at the sky and said, It's been more than 3 years since I saw the blue sky. How I miss it. Wuming recalled Skaha's words. You won't grow even if you continue to stay here. From today onwards, go out and train. I hope you can fulfill my wish when we meet again. Even if I have the ability to kill you, I won't, ma. Sister Skaha. In fact, Wuming lacked love. Before meeting Skaha, Wuming only had one relative, and that was the dean. Wuming became a problem child because there was no one around who could accept him, especially after he discovered that he was different from others. After the dean's death, Wuming left that world without hesitation after fulfilling the dean's last wish. Because of Wuming's personality, both his teachers and classmates treated him as a problem child. Only his neighbors treated Wuming better. Therefore, Wuming didn't miss leaving that world at all. However, during the 3 years he lived with Skaha, Wuming experienced a different kind of care from the dean. Wuming and Skaha didn't only have a master-disciple relationship, but also a brother-sister relationship. Skaha also saw it. She didn't expect Wuming, who looked very modern, to be so pure and simple. As it was her first time taking in a disciple, not only did Skaha have a fondness for talent, but she also developed a love for her younger brother. After all, Wuming's heart was so pure. This was the Dragon of Origins. The stronger something was, the purer it was. Being inexperienced, he didn't fit in with others due to his purity. Now Wu-Ming was facing a problem. He didn't know where he was. "Master, you've really given me a good start," Wu-Ming said with a wry smile. "Then let's fill our stomachs first." With that said, he walked into the depths of the forest. An hour later, in a cave deep in the forest, Wu-Ming sat on a rock with a fire in front of him. On top of the fire were some wooden racks. Some meat and 2 huge bear paws were being roasted on the racks. Outside the cave was the carcass of a huge bear. "I remember seeing bear paws in a book before. I wonder if they're delicious." Poor demonic bear. In fact, Wu-Ming wanted to go to the depths of the forest to pick some wild fruits. Because of the powerful creatures in the depths of the forest, wild fruits were more abundant than in the periphery. He didn't expect to meet this demonic bear halfway. The bear wanted to attack Wu-Ming, but it ended up as Wu-Ming's dinner. While Wu-Ming was roasting, he looked at the bear outside. "This bear skin can be used to sleep." Just like that, night fell. Wu-Ming welcomed the first night of his adventure. Chapter 4. The next day, Wu-Ming embarked on his journey. He walked through forests and fought monsters. He passed by villages and was welcomed by the villagers. He escaped from a cave and was chased by a terrifying dragon. When he was tired, he would look for a cave or a big tree. When he was thirsty, he would look for a mountain spring or a stream. When he was hungry, he would pick some wild fruits and hunt occasionally. Skaha was undoubtedly an experienced warrior and teacher. He was able to teach an inexperienced modern person to become so experienced in 3 years. Of course, the reason why he could travel freely in this era was also related to Wu-Ming's root dragon bloodline. In short, Wu-Ming experienced many adventures that modern people would call fantasy. In the end, he came to a place called Kannot. Is this Kannot? Wu-Ming was wearing a linen shirt. He carried a simple luggage and his approved gun. By the way, Wu-Ming could not turn the gun into a noble relic. The gun could only be considered a secret treasure. "Maybe it's because I'm not a hero," Wu-Ming once said. In fact, Wu-Ming did not have high expectations for his weapon to become a noble relic. After all, a noble relic was the crystallization of miracles. A few days ago, Wu-Ming met a group of roadblocks. Wu-Ming had a friendly conversation with them. They kindly pointed the way to the nearest country to Wu-Ming. "Kannot. I remember they said that the lord of this territory is called, what was it again? Tini Makani. I think that's the name." To be honest, the people who lived in the era of the gods, whether it was a lord or a king, a commoner or a noble, were all creatures who lived under the rule of the gods. From Silent Wonder's point of view, the gods of the West were just a race with strange and powerful powers. In fact, this statement was not wrong. Silent Wonder's master, Skaha, had killed too many gods in the past, which led to him being cursed by the dead god, turning him into a human without dying. In summary, Wu-Ming entered Lord Tini's mansion and had a friendly conversation. The Lord of Kannot was a smart man. Wu-Ming successfully became a resident of the city and the Lord's bodyguard. God knew where Wu-Ming was when he left the demonic realm. It was not easy for him to find a country. Wu-Ming did not want to live in the open anymore. Who would want to live a life without a fixed residence when there was a good life? Wu-Ming was the same. Just like that, Wu-Ming settled down in the Kannot area. Because it was the era of gods, a large number of magical creatures roamed around. In contrast, there was a large number of people with powerful powers. They were the legendary heroes of the later generations. As the western region of Ireland, Kannot naturally had its own heroes. However, because Wu-Ming had been wandering around for a while, some of the more powerful magical creatures in the depths of the area ran to the outskirts. These heroes could not resist them. Once, a magical creature that was close to the level of a phantasmal beast wreaked havoc in Kannot. When everyone was in despair, Wu-Ming wielded the spear of Yggdrasil and used the Loon Rune to kill the magical creature after a few rounds of battle. Since then, the great hero who slayed the powerful magical creatures to protect Kannot, Selander, spread throughout Ireland. As his battle style was incomparably violent, just like a giant dragon, Wu-Ming was given the title of Dragon of Kannot. After that, Wu-Ming realized that the spear of Yggdrasil in his hand had some slight changes. It was as if, because its master had become a hero, it had to be worthy of its master. It gave Wu-Ming the feeling that it was going to evolve into a treasure artifact. During this period of time in Kannot, apart from practicing the Loon Rune and honing his martial arts, Wu-Ming also began to study the map of this world. This world was undoubtedly a world with a shaped moon. After coming to this world, Wu-Ming's mana was connected to Wu-Ming's origin. However, Wu-Ming realized that he was now in the period between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, which was the period of mythological history when the Ulster heroes and the Fiona Knights were active. According to Wuming's analysis, the mythological knowledge he learned in the previous world did not match in this world. For example, Wuming's master, Skahar, was not mentioned in detail in Celtic mythology. It only stated that Skahar lived in the Shadow Kingdom, one of the Celtic fairyland. She was the king of the netherworld that accepted the dead and spirits. She was also the gatekeeper of the Shadow Kingdom, a god of war who had the skills to surpass the divine realm. Due to killing countless spirits, humans and gods, as well as having the skills to surpass the divine realm, she was cursed to be immortal. In the 3 years that he spent with Skahar, Wuming realized that Skahar was a gentle big sister next door when she was not training him. When she was training, she was an extraordinary queen. Wuming did not know about the others, but he liked the feeling of being a big sister to Skahar. This kind of familial feeling was only given to Wuming by the old courtyard. Wuming believed that this was not the only thing that was wrong. Therefore he decided to leave Connaught and investigate the other regions. Just as Wuming decided to leave, the Lord of Connaught suddenly received a message from the King of Ireland. Princess Maeve, who was avoiding political marriage, was sent to Connaught to become the new lord. According to the historical records, Maeve was a polyamorous young lady who was engaged and married many kings and warriors. She was always a noble lady. Unlike Skahar's warrior queen temperament, Maeve had the temperament of a queen who controlled a country. In the myth, Maeve had announced the 3 requirements for becoming her husband, as well as her system of rotating husbands. In short, Wuming did not have a good impression of Maeve before he met her. As a person who had received modern education, Wuming did not like the character Mai Fu. However, this was also an opportunity to verify the differences between the mythological stories that Wuming knew and the characters in the Shape Moon world. After receiving the news, Wuming did not care about the former lord, Dini, who was making a fuss. The Queen of Connaught, Maeve, who started the long march to capture the bull in Ulster's greatest war. This is really interesting. Let me see the difference between you and the mythological record, Queen Maeve. Wuming said with a smile. On the other side, on the road to Connaught, in a carriage with an army escort, a beautiful girl with a perfect body like a goddess was sitting in the seat, muttering something. Sira, the dragon of Connaught, ah, what a powerful and handsome name, and Maeve, the queen of Connaught, humph, here I come, my little sigh. Wuming, who was far away in Connaught, suddenly felt a chill on his back, and his body trembled, but he did not care. In this way, Wuming welcomed the most difficult woman in his life. Chapter 5. Due to various reasons and the lack of transportation in Ireland at that time, Wuming learned from Dini that Maeve would only arrive in Connaught after at least a month. As the Lord of Connaught, Dini, who was going to retire in a month, told the envoy that he would welcome Princess Maeve warmly. Initially, Wuming thought that he was going to rebel, but Dini did not dare to do so. If he rebelled, the rest of the Irish territories would not hesitate to submit a petition to the King of Ireland to attack him. A bunch of old foxes. Wuming was speechless. Knowing that Maeve would take a month to reach Connaught, Wuming decided to go to the outskirts to train for a month. Wuming realized that the Spear of World Tree in his hand was getting hotter after he defeated the monsters and guarded Connaught. The heat made Wuming feel comfortable, as if Wuming was a tree sprouting in spring. Therefore, Wuming decided to go into seclusion to upgrade his relic. Skaha said that strictly speaking, Wuming did not belong to this world. Therefore, Wuming did not need the human imagination of the later generations to sublimate his relic. As long as he had the opportunity and grasped it, he could upgrade his skills or weapons into a relic. This was undoubtedly a great piece of news. This gave Wuming an effective way to become stronger. Not far away from Connaught, Wuming found a cave where the monsters that Wuming had killed lived. He blocked the entrance of the cave with a giant rock and added a loon rune. After he was ready, Wuming began to upgrade the Spear of World Tree. I remember Master said that upgrading a weapon into a relic would only happen when there is an appropriate time. I still have to rely on myself. Wuming recalled. Then Wuming sat on the ground with his legs crossed and wrapped the spear with magic power. It floated in front of Wuming. Just like that, in the dark cave, Wuming began to upgrade his first relic. Half a month later. Rumble. A mountain in the outskirts of Connaught was shaking as if there was an earthquake. It was accompanied by a thunderous sound. There was a giant rock at the foot of the mountain. There were cracks on the rock, and a touch of green could be vaguely seen through the cracks. Crack. Crack. The cracks on the giant rock kept on cracking, making an ear-piercing sound. Boom. The giant rock exploded into small pieces of gravel. A 10-meter tall tree grew out of the hole behind the giant rock. Finally, the noble phantasm has been upgraded. Wu Ming smiled. The gun in Wu Ming's hand had disappeared, but there was a white gauntlet on his left hand. The front part of the gauntlet extended out a tree branch, and the end of the branch was the towering tree. Yggdrasil of Yggdrasil, 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 Egan, Yggdrasil, 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 Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil's real name was to reproduce the growth of the Yggdrasil. The length and direction of growth would be determined by the amount of magical power provided by the master. When Wu Ming broke the giant rock, he only used a little bit of magical power. Yggdrasil had grown so long. If he were to evaluate Yggdrasil with a relic level, Wu Ming estimated that it would be at least an A++ relic. Wu Ming cut the branch between the arm and the tree. The arm turned into a silver-white holy spear in a flash of light. Yggdrasil had some white mysterious runes all over the body of the spear. The tip of the spear became even brighter. After Wu Ming performed a set of spear skills, he put the spear behind his back and looked up at the sky. Caw-caw. A bird-shaped demonic beast with a fleshy crown on its head was circling in the sky, making a strange sound from time to time. Hey you rascal, I'm in a good mood today and wanted to let you go. I didn't expect you to have designs on me. Wu Ming stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. His pupils vaguely looked like red vertical slits. Caw-caw. The demonic beast seemed to have heard what Wu Ming said. It circled in the sky a few times and then swooped down towards Wu Ming. Great, I'll use you as a sacrifice today. Wu Ming's expression became unruly. When the bird-shaped demonic beast was close to Wu Ming flew up and stabbed the holy spear in his hand like a poisonous snake. Caw. The bird-shaped demonic beast circled in the sky and kept swinging its body. Wu Ming stabbed the holy spear into the back of the bird-shaped demonic beast and grinned. Caw-caw. The bird-shaped demonic beast swung its body and flew away. On the main road not far from Kannot, a group of soldiers was hurrying along. The soldiers surrounded a carriage in the middle, as if protecting the important person in the carriage. A person who looked like a captain stood in front of the carriage and said to the carriage, "Your Highness, we will reach Kannot in half a day." "Is that so? Can we still speed up?" An extremely charming voice came from the carriage. "Your Highness, the soldiers have sped up their march according to your instructions and are nearing Kannot half a month in advance. The soldiers are already exhausted. Please allow me to request for a temporary stop to rest," the captain pleaded. "All right, then let the soldiers rest for a while. Anyway, this little bit of time won't make a difference." The charming voice in the carriage sounded again. "Yes, Your Highness." The captain obeyed. Thus, the entire group rested on the empty ground beside the main road. Not long after, a series of strange roars were heard. Caw-caw-caw. It was a flying demonic beast with two fleshy crowns on its head. It stopped roaring as if it was running away from something. Looking at its body, one of its wings was broken, and there were some blood stains on it. It could only fly less than 3 meters above the ground. A demonic beast is attacking. Protect the princess. The soldiers stood up one after another and held the weapons in their hands. However, their trembling hands were not complimentary. After all, most soldiers would not be able to return from a demonic beast of this level. After all, the king did not expect there to be a demonic beast of this level in Ireland. Powerful demonic beasts would not live on the plains where humans lived. Weak demonic beasts were basically dealt with by the king's men or heroes. This demonic beast that was neither powerful nor weak was obviously not native to Ireland. It should have just arrived in Kannot not long ago. Caw-caw. The demonic beast's eyes turned red. It could not understand why such weak humans dared to block its path. If it was not for that terrifying fellow behind it, it would definitely eat all the humans here. The bird-type demonic beast flew in a straight line and took away all the humans along the way. It forced its way into the middle of the army and seemed to be going straight through the group. Coincidentally, the carriage of the princess, who was being protected by everyone, was right in the middle of the group. As there were too many people around the carriage could not move at all. Just like that, when the bird-type demonic beast rushed to the front of the carriage, it flapped its intact wings and the entire carriage flew away in pieces. "Your Highness." The surrounding soldiers shouted in panic. "However, I was careless and let that demonic beast hold me back for a while. Since you have designs on me, don't even think about running away today." The arrogant voice of a young man was heard. "Let's end this. Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil." The bird-type demonic beast suddenly froze and a patch of green appeared on its body. The demonic beast's body shattered and a towering tree soared into the sky. On the giant tree the young man hugged the princess. The princess looked at the slightly arrogant young man in a daze and could not regain her senses for a long time. Chapter 6. My name is Maeve Frederick, the Princess of Ireland. I am the most beloved princess of my father, Achu Frederick. Since I was young I have heard people saying that I am unruly. But I am talented. So what if I am unruly? If I become the queen of this country, I will definitely lead this country to prosperity and end this internal division. Now that the country is in an unstable state, my father decided to choose a few of his daughters from the 6 of us to marry lords who can stabilize the country. Ah, my pitiful father, do you really think that this method of marriage will work? To these nobles who only pay lip service, this is like giving them a windfall. Besides, I don't want to marry those lords who are old enough to be my grandfather. Thus, when I was married off by my father, I used my intelligence to escape. I returned to the royal palace to meet my father. My father knows my temper and my intelligence. Thus, he sent my other sister to marry that noble. My father thought that if she were to marry elsewhere, it would be the same result. In addition, my father dotes on me. In the end, my father decided to bestow me a territory, Connaught. He also allowed me to find my own husband. That is great. This way I will be the queen of Connaught. I believe that under my wise leadership, the people of my territory will be happier. Also, I don't want to find my own husband. Those stinky men must be coveting my beauty. I must find a great hero who will not covet my beauty to be my husband. Oh right, I heard that a young hero has emerged in the Connaught region. His name is Sira. It is said that the hero wields a silver holy spear. When everyone was in despair, he killed the magical beast that was ravaging Connaught. No one could subdue it. How brave. I heard from others that he has black hair and black eyes. He has an imposing appearance and has a temperament that no ordinary person can have. When he fights he is unruly. It is said that his eyes can turn into the vertical pupils of a wild beast. He is like a berserk dragon that bites his opponent. Ah, what a beautiful, brave, and violent hero. It must be because the heavens couldn't stand the afternoon anymore, so they sent you to save me. You must be the husband that the heavens chose for me, Maeve. Ah, my adorable little Sai, I'll be right there, right there, right there. You must wait for me in Connaught. Ah, right, since I am afraid that my little Sai will leave Connaught, then I have to speed up. I have to reach there in at least 10 days. I have decided. I will speed up the marching speed of the guards. Speed up, according to the plan, we will only reach Connaught after a month. After half a month, I have only just arrived near the center of Connaught. Signed, these soldiers are really useless. In the future, I must build a strong army myself. Finally, I could see little Sai. I couldn't wait any longer. Just as I was about to give the order to speed up the march, the captain of the guards came to ask me to let the troops rest. Signed, that guard captain actually asked the army to rest. Do you know that you are delaying my time to see little Sai? We have rested many times along the way. In the end, I thought about it and decided to let it go. Seeing that they had escorted me along the way, I will let them rest for a while. After all, I am also a little nervous now, little Sai. Suddenly, the soldiers outside started to panic. Is there a magical beast attacking outside? How could it be? There shouldn't be any magical beasts of this level within the borders of our country. These magical beasts that are neither too strong nor too weak should have been wiped out. I can feel that the magical beasts are getting closer and closer to me. Why am I going to die? I can't accept this. I haven't seen you yet, my little Sai. The carriage was smashed apart. Strange, why didn't I feel any pain? Due to fear, I closed my eyes. However, I could still feel that I was saved by someone. I could feel the warmth of the person who saved me. In a moment of carelessness, I actually allowed that male magical beast to entangle me for a while. You two, husband and wife, can forget about escaping today. Let's end this. Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil. That voice was so unruly. I opened my eyes that I had closed because I was afraid. What did I see? A young man with a slightly unruly expression. He held a silver-white spear in one hand and hugged me in the other. Standing on a huge tree, the sun shone on his face. This is such a sacred scene. He must be Sira. As expected, you are the husband that the heavens have arranged for me. My little Sai. Chapter 7. 3 months had passed since Wu Ming rescued my Fu due to an accident. After Wu Ming was carried back to the nest by the previous magical beast, Wu Ming found that there was another magical beast in the nest. It seemed to be a male and a female. The male magical beast probably wanted to join forces with the female magical beast to deal with Wuming. Unfortunately, they were not strong enough. Wuming was entangled with the male magical beast for a while, and the female magical beast escaped with injuries. When Wuming learned that the girl he saved was Maeve, Wuming was stunned. That's right, Wuming really didn't expect Maeve to come back so quickly. After knowing the reason why she sped up because she wanted to see the legendary hero Sarence, Wuming felt helpless. To be honest, Wuming could not see that the arrogant genius girl he saved was the future Queen Maeve. By the way, it was not that Maeve did not have the ability to fight, but her ability was too weak. In addition, the situation was urgent at that time, and Maeve was in a state of fantasy, so Wuming saved the damsel in distress. Cough cough. To be honest, the hero saving the damsel in distress was indeed a cliché, but its effect was often effective on girls. Wuming was sitting on a boulder outside the city, meditating with his eyes closed. A girl was sitting next to him, staring at him intently. Until the veins on Wuming's head popped out. The girl was the current lord of Connaught, Maeve. In the end, Wuming sighed. "Sigh, my lord, what are you doing?" Wuming opened his eyes and turned to look at Maeve. Maeve smiled and said, "I'm just observing the daily practice of my savior and husband." That's right, since Wuming accidentally saved Maeve, the idea of a heavenly husband had been deeply ingrained in Maeve's heart. God knows what this self-conscious girl was thinking. Wuming rubbed his forehead helplessly. He had to admit that Mai Fu was very beautiful and charming. As for her personality, from what Wuming had observed, Mai Fu had yet to grow into the arrogant Queen Mai Fu who thought that all men would be addicted to her pomegranate dress. Right now, Maeve was just a rebellious and self-conscious little princess. In short, in summary, Wuming has no feelings for Mai Fu. How should I put it? Wuming was the dragon of origins, but he also had the lust of a dragon. However, Wuming's lust was temporarily suppressed by his other natures, resulting in Wuming's temporary sexual apathy. In addition, Wuming felt that Maeve was more like a naughty sister than a wife. With Wuming's help, Maeve had consolidated her political power in Connaught in the past 3 months. Because of Wuming's concern, Maeve recognized this heavenly husband even more. "Maeve. What's wrong, little Sai? You're a smart person, you should know what I'm thinking." "Little Sai, what are you talking about? It's so complicated, I don't understand." Then there was a moment of silence. Wuming sighed. "Maeve, I will be leaving this place soon." Maeve's beautiful face that maintained a smile froze for a moment, and her pupils dilated. "I'm a traveler. The reason why I settled down in Connaught was to rest. Now I have a new goal, so I'm preparing to leave." "Is that so? That's great, but I won't let you go. I will use all my means to stop you." Wuming was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Maeve to be so direct. "Then I'll help you with something. How about letting me go?" Maeve smiled as if she heard what she wanted. "Deal." 7 days later, Wuming received the news that Connaught had been humiliated by borrowing the Ulster Divine Bull and was preparing to attack Ulster. Wuming laughed bitterly. "Maeve, so that's what you're planning." This reminded Wuming of the long march to steal the bull. In the original novel, Maeve and her chosen husband were competing to see who was wealthier. She wanted to borrow the brown divine bull from the Ulster region. However, because the messenger was drunk and arrogant, he said that he would attack Ulster if he didn't borrow it. This made Cooley, who wanted to borrow the bull, back out. In the end, the war between Connaught and Ulster began. But that was many years later. With Maeve's current reputation and the strength of her soldiers, it was impossible for her to attack Ulster. It was likely that she would lose again and surrender. Therefore, Wuming guessed that Maeve would come back to him for help. After winning this war, Wuming could leave. "Sir Wuming, the Overlord is looking for you." A soldier came to Wuming's door and said, "As expected." "Got it. I'll go over right now." With that, Wuming opened the door and walked towards Maeve's meeting hall. When he reached the meeting hall, Wuming found that there was no one inside or outside the door. Just as Wuming was puzzled, he sensed Maeve's presence. Maeve slowly walked to the main seat in the meeting hall. Wuming did not stand on ceremony and sat beside Maeve. "I already know the general situation. But with the military strength of Connaught now, it's impossible to compare with the powerful Ulster. If you want me to lead the Connaught soldiers to attack, I think it's better to forget about it." Wuming went straight to the point without hesitation. "Don't worry, little Sai. I definitely won't fight an unprepared war. Do you remember the blood I asked you for the other day?" Wuming recalled the day when Wuming and Maeve reached an agreement. Maeve wanted Wuming to provide some essence blood. Wuming was not worried that Maeve would use some strange magic to control him. Maeve would not do that. She would not be Maeve if she did. What's the use of the blood? Wu Ming asked. Of course it's useful. I have a secret technique that can use a man's essence blood and my presence to quickly produce and nurture powerful warriors. Of course, although it's called production, it's actually the cyborgs produced through my hands and your essence blood. The strength of the cyborgs depends on the strength of the person who provides the essence blood. Therefore, I believe that with the soldiers produced from little-sized blood and my magic, our soldiers will definitely be invincible. Maeve said with a smile. Cyborgs? Wu Ming was not against the cyborgs. He was just a little repulsed. Then when will the war begin? 7 days later. Maeve said. I'm going out to train in the next few days. I'll be there on time. After that, Wu Ming got up and walked out of the door. Okay, little sigh. Maeve said with a grin. If Wu Ming remembered correctly after this war, it would be the time of Maeve's death. It was also a symbol of Ireland's weakness at this moment. However, because of Wu Ming, the long march to take the bull had been brought forward. Although it was not long, it was not short either. The outcome was still uncertain. Whether Cuchulainn would return from his studies, whether the King of Ulster would change, whether Fergus would still defect to Connaught, these were all unknown. However, Wu Ming was looking forward to it. His arrogant face appeared on his face again. Maeve smiled. She could see Wu Ming's arrogant face clearly from her seat. Wow, my little Sai, you're amazing. Chapter 8. 3 days later, Wu Ming saw the cyborg soldiers. Because they were cyborgs born from Wu Ming's blood, these cyborgs were more or less similar to Wu Ming in terms of appearance and temperament. Also because they were Wu Ming, the lifespan of these soldiers was much longer than that of ordinary cyborgs. Because Wu Ming and Maeve were leading the troops together, Wu Ming was asked by Maeve to say some motivational words in front of the soldiers. Wu Ming knew that he was not cut out for that, so he simply said a few words and left. Just like that, 4 days passed quickly. The day of war had arrived. The place where the two armies first fought was a plain. In the past it was full of vitality, but today, it was gloomy because of the murderous aura. All troops attack. With the command of both commanders, the soldiers of Connaught and Ulster began to charge. Wu Ming led the soldiers of Connaught. He charged at the front, while Maeve commanded from the rear. Sure enough, as soon as the war began, the Ulster army retreated in defeat. They could not resist the cyborgs of the Connaught army and Wu Ming who led the charge. Sure enough, Cuchulainn hasn't returned yet. Tiske. What a bummer. Wu Ming stood on the battlefield, watching the Connaught army constantly encroach on the Ulster army. The Ulster army retreated, which made Wu Ming become arrogant again. His pupils turned into a dragon and he looked very excited. Wu Ming called this state, dragonization. Wu Ming had already known about his change, but he did not deliberately suppress it. When Wu Ming awakened his birth memories, he already knew that during the period when he was not fully grown, he would develop a series of negative effects similar to that of a dragon. These negative effects would constantly be triggered. The only way was to adapt to these effects and control them. Forcibly suppressing them would only have the opposite effect. Fortunately, these negative effects would only appear once at a time. After they appeared, the next negative effect would only appear once he had completely adapted to and controlled them. By the way, the obscenity mentioned before was temporarily suppressed because of this. Wu Ming returned to Maeve's side. Wu Ming no longer needed to lead the army. Firstly, the Connaught army that was pursuing the Ulster army would be ordered to retreat by Maeve soon after the pursuit. Secondly, Wu Ming did not have a strong leader or soldiers. Wu Ming's dragonization was completely inspired by the war and the excitement of being able to fight against enemy heroes. Now that the excitement was gone, Wu Ming returned to his usual state. Maeve, from the looks of it, Connaught will be victorious very soon, Wu Ming said calmly. That's not necessarily the case. Little Sai, the enemy's powerful hero, hasn't appeared yet. Don't underestimate them. Maeve stood on the chariot and smiled at Wu Ming who was beside her. Is that so? I'm looking forward to it. Let's leave it at that for today. Messenger, pass down the order to withdraw the troops for the time being. Don't pursue. Maeve said to the messenger beside the chariot. Yes, Your Majesty. After saying that, he walked away. Your Majesty? You have such a bad taste, Maeve. Wu Ming heard it and smiled helplessly. What's wrong? Is it strange that I'm a queen? I'm the Queen of Connaught, Maeve said. It's fine, it's fine. It suits you, Queen Maeve. Wu Ming said with a smile. Let's go. Understood. Just like that, the first day of the war ended. Connaught marched towards Ulster with overwhelming strength. In the next 7 days, Ulster retreated in defeat. When they were about to lose half of their land, the hero named Cuchulainn returned from his training in the Country of Shadows. He said that he wanted to have a good fight with his senior, Sira, in the war. When Wuming heard the news, he instantly became excited and almost dragonized. Wuming was very excited. He was about to fight with the half-human, half-god hero of the Celtic people, the son of the sun god Ruger, the son of light, Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn's original name was Sertant. When he was young, he killed the guard dog of the wealthy merchant, Coden, with his bare hands. He said, "If this dog has offspring, I will be responsible for raising it and train it to be an equally powerful and loyal guard dog. Until then I will protect you." Therefore Sertant was called Coden's fierce dog, or Cuchulainn. When Cuchulainn was young, he entered the demonic realm and was recognized by the queen of the demonic realm, Skaha. Skaha imparted all her knowledge and martial arts to Cuchulainn, and he successfully walked out of the demonic realm. He shone brightly in the long march of the bull and was remembered by later generations. Wuming was not worried that Skaha would not teach Cuchulainn well after getting the chance to kill him. Skaha was not that kind of person. The longer a person lived, the more easygoing they would be. Skaha was the same. But she was also a warrior, and naturally would not give up on cultivating and teaching good seedlings. Therefore Wuming was looking forward to the battle with Cuchulainn. Soon the second day arrived. Because they were deep in Ulster, the marching speed of the Connaught army was now very slow. One side was ambushed by the enemy, and Wuming had already retreated to the rear to protect Maeve. Because there was no hero comparable to Wuming, Wuming did not deliberately ask to fight. Of course, this was also Maeve's arrangement. Now Cuchulainn was back. He was very powerful and often harassed the Connaught army, making their marching speed ridiculously slow. Therefore, when Wuming wanted to fight, and Maeve decided to send Wuming to deal with Cuchulainn because of the battle situation. Then Maeve decided to go to the front line with Wuming. First, to boost morale, and second, to prevent Fergus of the Ulster army from sneaking into the rear to kill Maeve. Wuming retreated to the rear for this reason. Fergus of the Ulster army also understood this and stayed by the side of the King of Ulster to protect him. Maeve followed to the front line, and it was convenient for Wuming to protect her. Soon, Wuming and Maeve arrived at the front line. They received a letter of challenge from Cuchulainn to a one-on-one fight with Wuming. After receiving the letter of challenge and persuading Maeve, Wuming came to the place where he and Cuchulainn had agreed to fight. It was a relatively wide grassland near the battlefield. Wuming came to the back and saw Cuchulainn standing on the grassland looking in his direction. Wuming also looked at him. Then, in the next moment, the two figures disappeared at the same time. Two figures appeared in the middle of the grassland, their spears touching each other. Wuming's face was full of excitement. His pupils became vertical, and it was obvious that he had activated dragon form. On the opposite side, Cuchulainn also bared his teeth and grinned, looking ecstatic. The two of them had never met before, but as if their hearts were linked, they laughed. "You must be Sira. You must be Cuchulainn." Chapter 9. Ever since Wuming left Connaught, he first hid his identity and traveled to Ulster and Leinster. During this time he also obtained some treasures for various reasons. Tools and objects obtained from fighting heroes, treasures, weapons, jewelry, gold coins, etc. When he obtained too many of these treasures, Wuming suddenly had an idea. He used some of the quality items to refine a space-type loon rune for himself. Wuming spent 7 days to complete the rune. Wuming fixed the rune on the wall of his hand and placed all the treasures, tools, jewelry, gold coins, weapons, including Wuming's Spear of the World Tree, into the rune. If the rune was damaged or disappeared due to external forces, the items within the rune would all scatter out. It wouldn't cause the items to disappear along with the rune. Now Wuming was doing his final inspection in Leinster. Wuming stood on a cliff by the shore and looked into the distance. As expected, the historical stories recorded in my previous world don't completely match the ones in this world, Wuming said calmly. Actually, that wasn't the case. Due to the long history, the accuracy of the historical records was greatly reduced. In addition to various modifications in later generations, that was why Wuming encountered heroes in historical myths and legends that didn't match the ones recorded in history books. Wuming decided to go to Great Headland Island to take a look. Of course, this was just a simple trip to see the country that King Arthur had once ruled. When Wu Ming went on a punitive expedition against a demonic beast, he obtained an old set of armor in its cave. This armor was a full body suit including the head. Although this armor was old, it was still very sturdy. After Wu Ming inquired about it, he learned about the origin of this armor from an old man in a village. King Arthur's gift *********. This was found by the old man from the inner collar of the armor. The front part meant King Arthur's gift, but the back part was too worn out to be seen. The old man said that this set of armor was brought by his grandfather from Great Britain. He originally wanted to sell it to a blacksmith in the big city, but who would have thought that the old man's grandfather would never return? When he heard that this set of armor was found in the cave of the magical beast that Wu Ming had defeated, the old man didn't say anything and just kept sighing. The old man gestured for Wu Ming to take this thing away, as if to the old man, it was a disaster. What interested Wu Ming more was that this set of armor could be worn by Wu Ming and fit him perfectly. Wu Ming, after cleaning the armor, put it on. Because of this, Wu Ming decided to go on a trip to Great Headland Island. Because it was a long time ago, the technology wasn't advanced. Wu Ming found a ship that could go to Great Headland Island a few days later. After Wu Ming paid some gold coins, the captain said that there was no problem at all. After a long journey that took half a month, Wu Ming finally set foot on Great Headland Island. His current location was the southernmost part of Great Headland Island, Wales. Because most of the west side of Great Headland Island was mountainous, Wu Ming's ship was headed to the southern part of England where there were more plains and more cities. Coincidentally, the legendary capital of King Arthur, Camelot, was in the southwest of Wales, not far from where Wu Ming landed. At night, Wu Ming arrived at the palace. Hearing that this was a palace that was transformed from King Arthur's palace, Wu Ming wanted to enter the palace library to see if there was any reliable information. As soon as he entered the palace, Wu Ming realized that there were many powerful knights. Wu Ming could defeat them, but Wu Ming would have to put in some effort. Because of Skaha, Wu Ming's various skills could be said to be at a higher level. Of course, in the eyes of those experts, Wu Ming was just showing off his slight skill in front of an expert. Therefore Wu Ming's stealth skill came in handy here. Wu Ming seriously suspected that if he turned into a heroic spirit, he might be able to adapt to all 7 ordinary classes. As for those legendary adjudicators and avengers, Wu Ming didn't want to think about them. Outside the study, Wu Ming drew a few runes. After a wave of spatial fluctuations, Wu Ming entered the study. I have to say, the royal library is really big. Wu Ming specifically went to look for books that looked particularly old. Wu Ming summoned the light loon, and a ball of light appeared beside him. Wu Ming used the light of the ball of light to read the books. 7 days later, Wu Ming put down the book in his hand and let out a long sigh. Phew. Sure enough, reading is the most enjoyable. Wu Ming read for 7 days in a row. When he was hungry, he would take out the prepared food from the spatial runes. As a warrior, reading books was not tiring. Besides, as someone who was addicted to the sea of books, he wouldn't feel tired. It's almost time to go. I've almost finished reading all the information I wanted. Wu Ming only read about some things that happened after King Arthur was destroyed. Wu Ming found that in general, the King Arthur of this world was similar to the King Arthur that he knew. However, the King Arthur of this world had an additional knight that seemed unimportant, but was actually very important. Before King Arthur became king, he was asked by the previous king, King Uther, to assist King Arthur together with Mage Merlin. After King Arthur became the queen, he began to assist King Arthur. He was a knight and a mage. He often discussed the mysteries of spells with Wizard Merlin, and he often fought valiantly on the battlefield to help King Arthur devise strategies. He had a good relationship with all the knights, especially the rebellious knight Mordred. After the kingdom was stabilized, he left Camelot and began a new round of travel. Although in this world, Queen Guinevere did not fall in love with the first knight Lancelot, Lancelot still fell in love with the queen. When he was discovered, he ran away. This was the beginning of the end of King Arthur. Later, under the pressure of the people, King Arthur went to France to take Lancelot in. The rebellious knight Mordred took advantage of this opportunity to rebel. In the end, King Arthur was severely injured in the Battle of Camelot. Strangely, Wu Ming found the composition of a magic circle in an ancient book. It was written in the first Lune rune. What is going on? Why is there a Lune rune? Wu Ming could not figure it out. In the end, Wu Ming laid out the pattern of a magic circle. I happen to have the tools that make up the magic circle. Things are getting weirder and weirder. But let's see what's going on. Wu Ming injected his mana into the circle. The circle was activated, and a white light enveloped Wu Ming. Wu Ming did not even have time to react before he disappeared along with the circle. All that was left was a book that slowly turned to dust in the wind. Chapter 10. When Wuming found himself wrapped in a magic array, he knew that this was a high-level teleportation array. Then Wuming ran the magic in his body to wrap his whole body. Wuming did not notice that there was a faint light spot on his armor. Why do I feel like I've been tricked by myself? For a moment, Wuming's eyes lit up, and Wuming closed his eyes. The feeling of stepping on solid ground came, and after confirming that he had arrived at the teleportation location, Wuming opened his eyes. Because of the sudden teleportation, Wuming hurriedly put on the helmet of the armor. There were two blade-like protrusions on both sides of the top of the helmet, extending backward, and the shape was slightly like a dragon's horn. The face was sealed, and only the eyes of the armor revealed a thin slit that did not affect the vision. Wuming opened his eyes. He was now in a forest, and there were two people standing in front of him, one old and one young, one tall and one short. The former was tall, with a slight king's temperament, and his body looked very strong, but Wuming still found that the old man's breath was not enough, and it was obvious that he would not live for long. The latter was wearing a white robe, holding a strange staff and looked handsome, but his face was like a circle in Wuming's eyes. Is this the legendary dragon, Mage Merlin? The old man obviously decided to find it strange. He summoned a dragon, so why did a man come out? Your Royal Highness King Yusef, there is no doubt that this is the legendary dragon, I can assure you, said the mage named Merlin. Wuming was wearing full body armor, and his head was covered, so his face could not be seen, but Wuming's heart was exploding at the moment. What is this situation? King Yusef. Merlin. Wuming shouted in his heart. King Yusef thought for a moment, and took a rectangular wooden box from his back. He opened the wooden box, presented it in front of Wuming, and said, Legendary dragon, I am willing to use this celestial iron sword to ask you to protect Britain before the new king grows up. Please forgive my offense and agree to my request. Wuming froze for a moment, looked at the celestial iron sword in the center of the wooden box, and was instantly embarrassed. What kind of sword is this? This is a big iron block that looks like a sword. Of course, the magic contained in this big iron block was extremely amazing. Wuming thought for a moment and did not say a word. Wuming guessed that the legendary dragon they were talking about was probably the dragon, but Wuming was not sure, so he denied his identity. However, Wizard Merlin pointed to a scroll on the ground and said, This scroll is connected to another scroll, the legendary dragon summoning scroll. It has the dried blood of the legendary dragon, so it must summon the legendary dragon. Merlin's meaning made Wuming have to bite the bullet. Let's put this matter aside for now. Where is this place? Wuming changed the subject. This is the forest on the outskirts of Camelot, the capital of Britain. Sure enough, that scroll sent me to the past. Wuming thought in his heart. Your Highness King Yusef, I can't guarantee that I can completely protect Britain, but I can promise that I will do my best to protect Britain from harm. What do you think? Wuming thought for a moment. Now that he was here, he had to find a place to stay. He could not just wander around aimlessly. In that case, I will thank the legendary dragon on behalf of my British people. In this way, Wuming was inexplicably brought back to Camelot by old Yusef and Merlin. 10 years had passed. 10 years ago, Wuming joined the Knights of Camelot as a knight who trained alone in the mountains. He also became King Yusef's personal guard and was responsible for some matters that the knights could not handle, such as the attack of powerful magical beasts or the delay of the beheading operation when the enemy invaded. As for Wizard Merlin, Wuming became friends with him. Moreover, Wuming always felt that the mage named Merlin, who was not old at all, knew something. He was always smiling all day long. Sometimes, Wuming would always punch Merlin in the face for no reason. Wuming did not know how many times he had slapped him in the face. Wuming did not want the sky iron sword, but King Yusef insisted on giving it to Wuming. Wuming had no choice but to accept it. Due to his identity as a knight, Wuming's spear was not very suitable for him to use. Thus, he decided to forge this outer sky mysterious iron sword into a powerful sword. When talking about the sword, it was natural to talk about the armor. After talking about the armor, Wuming was surprised to find that the armor on his body had completely changed after he was teleported. It became silver and shiny, completely unlike the shabby gray armor before. Wuming carefully checked it. In addition to becoming brand new, the unclear text in the collar had disappeared. Speaking of which, Wuming wanted to see what was erased later. Because Wuming wore a bright white armor with a dragon-like helmet, and Wuming looked like a violent silver dragon in battle, Wuming was called the British Silver Dragon by the people. Because Merlin thought that Wuming was not suitable for this era, Merlin gave Wuming a name that was biased towards this era, Villo. British Silver Dragon, Villo. For the problem of the name, Wu-ming was already too tired to complain. Silver Dragon. Why do the people I meet always like to give me strange names? Wu-ming said helplessly. To be honest, the two words Silver Dragon always gave him a strange feeling. During this period, Wu-ming learned about the plan of King Yusef and Merlin. Because the Roman Empire was invaded by foreign enemies, it was showing signs of decline and division. The British Isles, which were once the territory of the Roman Empire, fell into a state of internal strife. A few years ago, King Yusef defeated King Fudikin. King Yusef knew that he would not live for long, so he set up a foreshadowing early. He placed his hopes on the next generation of king, and his royal magician Merlin planned to create a new king who was born above mortals. They combined the blood of the British king, the ideology of Britain as the Red Dragon, and the noble female blood to perfectly integrate the two to create a mother fetus. In this way, the legendary King Arthur, Artoria Pendragon, was quietly born. He entrusted Artoria to a trusted noble knight and let the noble knight raise King Yusef's child, which was King Arthur. During this period, Merlin would teach King Arthur all kinds of knowledge and fighting abilities to become a king in the dream. Finally, when King Yusef died, it was the time for the new king, King Arthur, to lead the people. Wu-ming's character was to train and help King Arthur until King Arthur became a real king and no longer needed him. This was undoubtedly inconsistent with the historical story that Wu-ming learned. What made Wu-ming speechless was that the King of Knights, King Arthur, was actually a woman. This made Wu-ming, who had just learned about the plan, shocked. In the beginning, Wu-ming did not care about King Arthur. After a while, Wu-ming met King Arthur in the forest and showed his superb skills. From then on, Wu-ming had another sister. Because Merlin was responsible for teaching King Arthur the ability to fight and be a king, therefore Wu-ming basically had nothing to do except protect Britain when there was war or when there was an invasion of magical beasts. For a pure girl, Wu-ming decided that it was necessary for him to accompany King Arthur more and let him enjoy the joy of being a girl before he became a king. Chapter 11. In a forest, a young man-girl, with a slightly neutral appearance, was training his thin and small body in the forest. Leah, the teenager girl, stumbled and almost fell. "Please don't call me that, Vi," the teenager girl said with a slightly red face. "Leah, you've grown up. The little girl who used to follow me and call me brother has grown up." Wu-ming appeared behind Leah with a strange voice. Leah looked at Wu-ming angrily. All right. I haven't taken you out to play for a long time. I've specially asked for leave to accompany you today," Wu-ming said with a smile. Leah did not say anything. She looked at Wu-ming's eyes, wanting to say something but hesitated. "What's wrong, Leah?" "My Leah is not the kind of person who is indecisive." Leah's face turned slightly red again because of the words "my." "Vi, I want to continue training today, so let's postpone the trip for now," Leah said with a slight nervousness. "Understood. Come back early tonight. Merlin and I have something to tell you." Wu-ming touched Leah's head again. To be honest, he loved that blonde hair so much that he could not put it down. "Got it? Also, don't touch my head," Leah said with a red face. Ever since Leah was chosen by the British Silver Dragon, Leah moved out of her original home and lived in Wiz's house. Of course, this was Wu-ming's request. To put it nicely, it was to nurture an excellent knight. After saying goodbye to Leah, Wu-ming began to move northwest of Camelot. Finally, he walked to a mountain wall. Wu-ming raised his hand and drew a few runes in the air. The mountain wall in front of him rippled and revealed the entrance of a cave. Wu-ming walked in without hesitation. "I wonder how the sword is being forged. Is Merlin reliable?" Wu-ming said as he walked. "I'm so sad, Vi. Are you that pessimistic?" A charming male voice was heard. Because it was dark in the cave, the person's face could not be seen clearly. "My fists are thirsty." Wu-ming raised his armored arm. Wait, don't slap my face for no reason." The man's voice was flustered and panicked. "I'm kidding. Why are you so nervous, Merlin?" Wu-ming said with a smile and lowered his fist. "You mischievous fellow. Do you think I won't tell Leah your true colors?" A young man wearing a white robe and a wooden staff walked out of the shadows. This person was the great wizard Merlin who had summoned Wu-ming 10 years ago. "She trusts me more than you, Mage Merlin." Wu-ming kept walking into the cave. "Forget it. You go take a look at the sword first. It's a crucial moment." Wu-ming and Merlin walked to the end of the cave. What greeted their eyes was a tall earthen furnace. There was a circular opening in the middle of the furnace, and one could see the interior of the furnace from the outside. Golden flames were burning in the furnace, and a bright silver sword was floating above the flames. Because it was burning, the bright silver sword was still moving like a sword-shaped liquid metal. Wu Ming bit his middle finger and immediately extended his hand into the furnace, placing his finger on the sword. Golden blood flowed onto the sword like water, wheezing and wheezing. After absorbing Wu Ming's blood, the sword shone even more brightly. The excess blood flowed from the sword into the flames, causing the flames to burn even more vigorously. Even Merlin, who was watching from afar, felt a pang of pain. I really don't know what you're thinking. If you want to use blood, just use it. Why use so much? Merlin shuddered. You still have the nerve to say that. You say that blood is a rare treasure, and that you add some to Leah's food every time you cook. It's for her after all. That's fine, but you want to use my blood to grow vegetables? Do you know how much blood I've lost? You despicable gardener. Wu Ming glared at Merlin. Merlin did not mind and said with a smile, Oh, isn't this all for Britain? Ah. Is it? I can't be bothered with you. Wu Ming focused on letting out the blood. After a while, Wu Ming's face turned pale, and his middle finger stopped bleeding. Wu Ming withdrew his hand and looked at the sword in the furnace quietly. Merlin did the same and looked at the sword in the furnace quietly. Suddenly, the flames in the furnace began to burn fiercely, and the sword in the furnace began to absorb the flames wildly. Whoosh! The flames burned fiercely. After a while, the flames were completely absorbed by the sword in the furnace. The originally bright silver sword became even more dazzling. The corners of Wu Ming's mouth curled up, and he stretched out his hand. The sword floated into Wu Ming's hand by itself. Wu Ming looked at the sword that was connected to his blood and could not help but praise, as expected of the sacred sword of Meteor. Congratulations, Wu Ming, Merlin said from the side, and this time he used Wu Ming's real name. This is all thanks to you, Merlin. I express my gratitude to you here. Wu Ming bowed to Merlin. Ah. I didn't expect that there would be a day when you would bow to me. Ha ha ha. Merlin seemed to have seen something incredible and he laughed while holding his stomach. By the way, I'm going to retreat for a while. During this time I'll leave Britain and Lia to you. Wu Ming did not care about Merlin's laughter and said calmly. He decided to start turning this sword into his own noble artifact now. It's so sudden. I have no problem, but it's hard to explain to Lia. Merlin also stopped laughing and now was the time to talk business. I'll tell Lia to go home early today, and then you can tell her that I'm going out to fight monsters. Also, today is the time to tell Lia about her background. I do the bad things and the good things always come to you. It can't be helped, I'm just a mage. Merlin laughed evilly. Don't give me that. You're the British sword saint. Others may not know about it, but I do. Wu Ming looked at Merlin helplessly. Although Wu Ming practiced his spear skills every day, he basically did not use a spear in the past 10 years, and had been using mass-produced knights. Although Wu Ming and Skahar majored in spear skills, Skahar was also a master of other weapons. There was once when Merlin saw Wu Ming practicing his swordsmanship and gave him some pointers. Unexpectedly, after being stunned for a moment, Wu Ming suddenly swung his sword at Merlin, and scared him so much that he blocked it with his staff. Only then did Wu Ming realize that Merlin's swordsmanship was very strong. After that, Wu Ming half-jokingly called Merlin the British sword saint. Don't talk nonsense, I'm not worthy of being called the British sword saint. Merlin said that he could not afford to be called the British sword saint, but he still showed a proud smile on his face. Alright, stop talking nonsense. Let's go, and remember to seal the entrance of the cave when we reach it. Wu Ming waved his hand, indicating that he wanted to go into seclusion there. Come out as soon as possible, King Yusef can't hold on for much longer. I'll tell Lia about her background tonight. After saying that, Merlin turned around and left. Phew. Wu Ming took a deep breath and sat in front of the furnace with his back against it. Although the flames in the furnace had disappeared, the residual heat was still there. With Wu Ming's blood as the fuel, the residual heat of the flames could last for a long time. At this point, Wu Ming began to upgrade the sword's noble phantasm. Wu Ming had a premonition that the relic would be upgraded very quickly this time. Chapter 12. Wu Ming and Lia played crazily for the whole day, forgetting the time. When they came back to their senses, it was already sunset. Let's go, Lia. I'll personally cook today and make you a delicious meal. Wu Ming held Lia's hand and said with a smile. Well, I'm looking forward to it, Vi. Lia smiled brightly like a gorgeous lily. Wu Ming was stunned. It seems that Lia is really tired these days. It's been a long time since I saw Lia smile like this. After returning home, Wu Ming made a sumptuous dinner for Lia under Merlin's resentful gaze. After eating with Lia, Lia asked to practice her swordsmanship and went to the backyard of the house. Wu Ming asked Merlin as he cleaned up the dishes. "What's going on with King Yusef? Did he ask you to do this?" Although it was a question, Wu Ming used an affirmative tone. Merlin sat on the wooden chair in front of the dining table and said without changing his expression, "Yes. Of course King Yusef wanted it. When he knew that you had been in seclusion for nearly 3 months and had not come out, he decisively cut off the magic that I set up for him to maintain his life. He used the reason that, since the legendary dragon could not protect my people and my land, then my descendants will protect them, to forcibly cut off the magic, and then he died suddenly." Merlin sighed. It was obvious that King Yusef wanted to do this from the beginning. If it were not for Wu Ming doing a good job these years, King Yusef would have cut off the magic that maintained his life earlier. Wu Ming put the washed dishes in the kitchen and sat opposite Merlin. "Since I have made a contract with him, then I have a certain responsibility for his death. I will be responsible for Lia's coronation." Although Wu Ming had lived in modern human society for more than 10 years, it did not mean that he had become like a human. As the great origin dragon, Wu Ming did not want to break his promise. Even if he broke his promise because of an accident, Wu Ming would try his best to make up for it, not to mention that this was not breaking his promise. As expected of the legendary dragon, my dear friend Wu Ming. In fact, Merlin hated humans. Therefore, for Merlin, Wu Ming, whose bloodline was the origin dragon, was a very good friend. As for the reason why Merlin hated humans, Wu Ming did not know. If Merlin did not say it, he would not ask. As for why Merlin would help King Yusef and teach King Arthur, Wu Ming did not know. "When is the sword in the stone sword drawing ceremony?" Wu Ming asked. 3 days later. Finally, the new king is going to ascend the throne. This country in the end still has to rely on themselves to save it. Wu Ming sighed. Strictly speaking, Wu Ming and Merlin were not citizens of this country. Merlin had the highest level of magicians, clairvoyance, and he had long seen the destruction of King Arthur's dynasty. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was just a passerby. Wu Ming also knew that King Arthur's dynasty would be destroyed. Wu Ming wanted to stop this tragedy, but history had the power to correct it. Even if Britain was not destroyed in King Arthur's generation, it would be destroyed in the next generation. This generation would be the source of the destruction of the next generation. Wu Ming did not know if he would oppose Merlin in the future. First, Merlin was a trustworthy friend. Second, he was also a powerful wizard and swordsman. Based on these 2 points alone, Wu Ming did not want to fight with him. Merlin was the same. It was not easy to make a close friend. Who would want to fight with a sword? Time passed quickly. 3 days later, in the courtyard where the sword in the stone was located, the sword in the middle was covered by a red cloth. There was a sea of people here, and it was unusually crowded. Fortunately, the walls of the courtyard were net-shaped fences that did not obstruct the view. The courtyard was not small, and it could barely accommodate the knights who wanted the sword. Of course, there were people outside the fences. After all, the king's selection ceremony was very important. When everyone arrived, Merlin, who had been wearing the same clothes, appeared. He lifted the red cloth covering the sword in the stone, and the sword in the stone appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It was a very beautiful sword. Compared to a weapon, it was more like an ornament, a sword that the king did not need to fight. However, this sword was far from that simple. The sword was inserted into a square stone. Around the stone were written, "Whoever pulls out this sword and is born here is the king." The sword was also engraved with the inscription, "Only the king can take the sword in the stone." It meant that only the king can pull out the sword in the stone. As the British silver dragon who had the most children after King Yusuf, Wu Ming was the first to step forward and pull out the sword. Wu Ming knew that he could pull it out. After all, this sword was enchanted by Merlin. Wu Ming could still pull it out if he wanted to. Because it was just a formality, Wu Ming stepped forward and gently grasped the sword. He then let go and said with a smile, "Haha, it seems that I can't pull it out." The nobles were obviously relieved. Compared to the British silver dragon in front of them, they would prefer someone else to be the king. After all, Wu Ming had been at odds with these nobles for many years. However, the commoners and some of the knights were a little disappointed. Next, one by one, the knights stepped forward to pull out their swords. Some of them knew their limits and tried to pull out their swords lightly. Knowing that they couldn't pull it out, they stopped. Some of them hugged their swords tightly until their faces turned pale. Only then did they walk away unwillingly. Wu Ming saw all of this. He vaguely remembered the faces of those who didn't want to pull out the sword. He was going to recruit these people into the new order of knights. Since Wu Ming became a knight, Wu Ming had always believed that character was more important than strength. Not long after, almost all of the knights had pulled out their swords. There was only one special knight left, and that was Artoria, who was disguised as a man. Because to become a noble knight, one had to be an adult, and Artoria was obviously underage. For this reason, Wu Ming specially applied for a knight title for Artoria. Artoria also passed the test to become a knight, but the nobles still refused to let go because she was not old enough. As a result, Artoria was given a special knight title and became a special knight. Therefore, the commoners began to ask for a new king. Some wanted to use force to determine the winner, while others wanted Wu Ming to be the new king. This was what most people were shouting for. The nobles were instantly unhappy and immediately objected. What a joke. What was the difference between the two? Everyone knew that the British Silver Dragon was now the most powerful knight in Britain. Even King Yusef might not be able to defeat the British Silver Dragon in force. Of course, for Wu Ming, who was gradually awakening the bloodline of the Root Dragon and had greatly improved his physical magic power, if a human could still defeat him, then he should find a piece of tofu and kill himself. Even if it was Cuculin, Wu Ming estimated that he could defeat him now. After all, Wu Ming had obtained the second noble phantasm. At this moment, no one was optimistic about the last knight. After all, in the eyes of many who did not know the truth, Artoria became a knight because of the British Silver Dragon Villo. Just as the nobles were loudly objecting to using force to elect a new king, Artoria stood in front of the sword in the stone. She heard a voice. It was Merlin's voice. Before you pick up that thing, it's better to think carefully. Once you pick up that sword, you will no longer be a human until the end. You will be hated by all humans and you will eventually meet a tragic death. Artoria looked at Wu Ming. She found that Wu Ming's eyes were full of support and trust. Then she resolutely reached out and grabbed the sword in the stone. She pulled hard, clang, the sound of the sword being unsheathed echoed throughout the sky. At this moment, everyone, whether they were commoners or nobles, was silent. The commoners' eyes were full of hope, while the nobles' faces were full of confusion. Greetings, King. The commoners and nobles were startled by the voice and looked at the source of the voice. Wu Ming knelt on one knee in front of Artoria. Obviously he was greeting the new king. Then almost all the knights followed suit and knelt down on one knee. Greetings, King. The voices of the knights were united and resounded through the sky. When the commoners saw this, they hesitated for a moment. Then they followed suit and knelt down shouting, Greetings, King. The nobles clearly wanted to quibble about something. Wu Ming did not even look at them and shouted again. Greetings, King. This time Wu Ming's wooming was mixed with magic. His voice rang in almost everyone's ears. The knights and commoners shouted together. Greetings, King. Greetings, King. Greetings, King. This voice did not stop for a long time. The nobles looked at Artoria, who was holding the sword of the stone high in the sun. The nobles were influenced by the people and the knights. The knights and commoners also shouted together. However, the nobles' voices were still a little unsatisfied. Greetings, King. Wu Ming looked at Artoria, who was surrounded by the sunlight and the commoners, and muttered, King Arthur, Artoria Pendragon. A new king is born. Chapter 13. It had been 7 days since Artoria pulled out the sword in the stone. During these 7 days the nobles were in a mess. They complained that the new king was too young. Under Artoria's worried eyes and Merlin's mocking eyes, Wu Ming visited all the nobles at night. After 7 days there were no more objections. Instead, the nobles kept praising the new king for being young and promising. They even praised the new king for drawing his sword and calling it the will of God. At night in the palace, Artoria and Wu Ming were dealing with documents in the meeting room, while Merlin was preparing for the coronation ceremony. Due to the lack of a king, Artoria started to deal with the documents in advance with Wu Ming's company. After dealing with the last document of the day, Artoria looked at Wu Ming. Wu Ming was also dealing with the last document. Artoria stared at Wu Ming, who was working on the documents in a daze. A strange light appeared in her eyes. When Wu Ming finished dealing with the last document, he noticed that Artoria was staring at him. What is it, Lia? Is something the matter? Avai, nothing. I just want to know how you convinced the nobles. Merlin told me that the nobles are very difficult to deal with, Artoria asked with a red face. Oh, you're talking about those nobles? It's very simple. I just told them, if you're against Al becoming the king, then I'll become the king. I believe that no matter if it's in terms of reputation, experience, or strength, I'm qualified. I believe that the people will also choose me. I told them that. Then the nobles pretended that I was thinking about it, but in fact they were already panicking. Now they want you to be the king immediately. After all, it's easier for them to deal with you than me. Wuming got up and sat beside Artoria. Of course, there are nobles who support you, such as your foster father Hector and your foster brother Kai. I'm going to form a new order of knights and invite them to join. After all, your foster father and foster brother are also very good knights. While talking, Wuming couldn't help but despise the nobles who opposed Artoria. They couldn't even see the situation clearly. What right did they have to be nobles? Sooner or later they would be stripped of their titles. My foster father and foster brother. They were indeed excellent knights. Before I met you, my foster father was my role model and my foster brother had been competing with me in a friendly manner. Now that I think about it, it was a wonderful time. Artoria sighed with emotion. You have to get used to it. After all, you are going to be the king soon. Besides, you have me by your side. Wuming said as he patted Artoria's head. Artoria's face turned red again. Then she said, don't worry. By the way, Vi, wouldn't it be better if you become the king? Artoria was a little nervous. So, why do you say that? Wuming was puzzled. Because you said it yourself. Whether it is reputation, experience, or strength, you are more suitable. Artoria looked into Wuming's eyes and said, yeah, you have to believe in yourself. Let's not talk about whether I am a local or not. Even if I am, I will not become the king. My favorite thing is traveling. How can I travel if I become the king? Wuming laughed. Artoria looked at Wuming's handsome face that didn't age at all. By the way, Vi, how old are you? I remember that I've known about you for as long as I can remember, Silver Dragon of Britannia, and all the other kings around me have acknowledged your existence, Artoria suddenly thought. In fact, there were many kings on the island of Britain today. Britain was originally ruled by Rome. Because of the civil strife in Rome, Britain became independent. However, at the same time, the disaster of the people came. Originally, it was the demon beast. Now there was war. Since Wuming was appointed by King Yusef and made a name for himself, he traveled around the island of Britain when Camelot was settled. At the same time, he saved many people and helped many kings. Naturally, the title of the British Silver Dragon appeared. My age? About 30 years old. To be honest, I can't remember the details. Wuming said casually. 30 years old. Are you really blessed by the legendary dragon, Vi? Artoria sighed in amazement. Wuming was laughing in his heart. Merlin once told the public that the British silver dragon Vilo Sarensfeld was a warrior blessed by the legendary dragon. He was also the knight of the king of Camelot who was guided by the legendary dragon. When he heard Merlin's words, Wuming was stunned. Wasn't the legendary dragon himself? When he came back to his senses, he immediately gave Merlin a punch. Thanks to this, Wuming's appearance did not change in the past 10 years. No one doubted it. Coupled with Wuming's kind temperament and powerful strength, the people of Camelot were very happy. Even the kings who were on good terms with Camelot would ask Wuming to help if they could not deal with the demon beasts. Of course, this was under the premise that King Yusef agreed. In fact, after King Yusef's death, many kings sent people to find Wuming in private. They wanted to recruit Wuming to their country. Of course, there were some before, but it was not obvious. Now, there were all kinds of temptations. If money did not work, they would use treasures. If treasures did not work, they would use weapons. If weapons did not work, they would use titles. If titles did not work, they would use beauties. Some even brought up their own sisters, daughters, and granddaughters. For the kings who gave Wuming a good impression, Wuming politely rejected them. As for the kings who Wuming hated, Wuming did not even care about them. Okay, don't think so much. Even if I am a warrior blessed by the legendary dragon, I am still your knight. I promise I will always be with you, my king. Your Majesty. Wuming smiled and his handsome face made Artoria dazed. When she came back to her senses, Artoria lowered her head and said with a red face, Okay, the documents are done. Let's go home. Early to bed early is good for health. You told me that. Artoria pushed Wuming. Realizing the problem, Wuming smiled bitterly and thought, why did I find that I became better looking before? Is this the benefit of the awakening of the origin dragon? By the way, Liao, what's wrong? When you become a king, call yourself the British Red Dragon. Oh, British? Red Dragon. Yes, we are the British Red Dragon and White Dragon. A pair. Let's talk about it later. Okay, don't push me. Alia, why is your face so red? Are you sick? No. Okay, let's go home and sleep. Yes. The moonlight came out from the dark clouds, illuminating the path of the man and woman. Chapter 14. 3 days later, Artoria, who had disguised herself as a man, accepted the coronation ceremony of the Pope. To be honest, Wuming was disgusted by the coronation ceremony. After all, as a king he had to let a believer be crowned. Well, although the West had always been like this, Wuming was not interested in gods. It was not that Wuming did not believe in the existence of gods. In this world full of mysteries, all kinds of things that people imagine were possible. Gods definitely existed in the world of the M-shaped moon. Even in the ordinary world that Wuming lived in, who could guarantee that there were no gods before? After the coronation ceremony, Wuming did not leave immediately. After all, as the symbol of Camello, Wuming still had to greet the ambassadors sent by the kings. This was the legendary diplomacy. After the ambassadors left, Wuming sat in the hall of the palace and let out a long sigh. Sigh, Wei, are you all right? You look like you're having a hard time, Artoria asked Wuming. As a king, she had to greet the ambassadors together with Wuming. I'm fine. I'm just not used to being a politician, Wuming said lazily. Politician? You have invented a very good word for it, Vi, Artoria said, reading Wuming's modern language carefully and admiringly. Wow. Actually, someone taught me this term. Wuming said a bit awkwardly. By the way, about the night order I mentioned, have you thought about it? Wuming asked. Well, I think it's good. We can do it. Artoria said seriously. No, the recruitment of the night order must be strict. Ability is not the most important thing. Character is the most important. Artoria raised her young face and looked at Wuming. Don't worry. I've thought about it. In the end you will be the final judge. Wuming touched Artoria's face and said. Is that so? Why are you touching my face? Artoria asked with a red face. To be honest, every time Wuming touched her body, Artoria would blush. Sometimes it was slightly red and sometimes it was as red as a monkey's butt. Because when I think that the owner of such a young face has to shoulder the burden of the whole country, I feel that God is unfair. Wuming's eyes were filled with pity. After saying that, Artoria's face was no longer red. And Artoria were both silent. When I knew that I was going to be a king, I was very scared. Artoria paused and continued, Merlin told me that I was born to be a king. Ever since I could remember, he had been teaching me everything that a king should have. During the day I kept practicing. At night, Merlin taught me magic in my dreams. Slowly I got tired of it. Wuming's hand stopped touching Artoria's face. Because I was scared. The more I learned, the more I felt that I was not capable enough. I was scared that I could not become the king that Merlin and the people expected until what? Until I met you. Artoria looked into Wuming's eyes. Her emerald eyes were filled with emotions. Ever since I could remember, I knew the story of the Silver Dragon of Britain. As a knight he was very good. He was noble, powerful, smart, and kind. Everyone in Camelot praised him. Slowly, I started to work hard to become the Silver Dragon of Britain. Wuming put down his hand and listened to Artoria carefully. Back then, you met me in the forest where I often practiced. You said that you wanted to take me as your squire. I was so happy that I moved out of my foster father's house and moved to your house. Artoria lowered her head and smiled. A few years later, when I learned about your relationship with Merlin, I realized that the encounter in the forest could have been arranged. But I was still very happy. Because of you, Merlin had to slow down my training. Because of you, I was able to taste the joy of being a young girl. Because of you, I was able to feel your love. Finally, because of you, I got the motivation to become a king. Artoria raised her head and looked at Wuming again. She was about to throw herself into his arms. Artoria's mouth opened slightly. Wuming's pupils shrunk. He was a little surprised. If he was not mistaken, the last sentence, which was so weak that he almost did not hear it clearly, was, Wuming did not move, but his eyes kept darting around. Wuming did not expect that Artoria would have so many thoughts. Wuming thought about it carefully and understood. A young girl was told that she had to bear a heavy burden since she was born. Coincidentally, There was a perfect and handsome idol who was shouldering the burden of a young girl. After a deliberately arranged encounter, the young girl and the idol met and spent more than 10 years together. During these years, the idol took care of the young girl in every possible way. The young girl was very happy and gradually fell in love with the idol. When the young girl officially accepted the burden, the young girl confessed everything to the idol. Wu-ming now felt that Artoria's current situation was caused by him. A girl's heart is so mysterious, Wu-ming thought. Artoria looked at Wu-ming, who did not want to hug her. She lowered her head and her face was a little pale. Artoria stood up and said, "Well, I have something to do. Wu-ming hugged Artoria, who was already petite, in his arms. Artoria was a little stunned at first, but when she realized what was going on, she hugged Wu-ming tightly. Artoria's face was pressed against Wu-ming's chest, which was not wearing armor. She listened to the strong and powerful heartbeat of the king and smiled. "Yeah, I'm sorry," Wu-ming said. Artoria, who was in his arms, was stunned. "I can't promise that I can be with you until the end, but I will try my best to be with you until the end. This is the biggest promise I can give you." Wu-ming signed a contract with King Yusef. As long as Wu-ming fulfilled the contract, he would be freed. As a person who did not belong to this era, Wu-ming would most likely return to his era after he was freed. This was what Merlin told Wu-ming. Wu-ming immediately told Artoria his concern. Maybe it was because she trusted Wu-ming or because she learned from Merlin. Artoria did not change her expression. She just said lightly, "It's enough." The two of them hugged each other and blended together. Chapter 15. The next day, in her office in the palace, Artoria was sitting on a chair with her back against the floor-to-ceiling window. She was going through the documents she had submitted that day seriously. Merlin and Wu-ming were standing on either side of Artoria, giving her advice. Wu-ming was actually learning from her. After all, compared to being a politician, Merlin was more suitable than Wu-ming. After all, he was older. Just kidding. Wu-ming had also learned a lot about the skills of a politician when he was learning from Skaha. In addition, Wu-ming had dealt with the nobles and kings of various countries over the years, so he had learned a lot. However, compared to Merlin, who had taught Artoria how to be a king, Wu-ming had to admit defeat. Time went by little by little. When Artoria finished the last document under Merlin's guidance, Merlin stretched his body and said, "Let's go." Phew. The speed of processing today is obviously faster. It seems that soon the king will be able to process documents alone. Wu-ming nodded and said, "Yes, the king is indeed growing fast. She is one step closer to unifying the island of Britain. I have to thank the two of you. After all, without you, I wouldn't be who I am today," Artoria said calmly. Since last night, Wu-ming and Artoria had agreed that one would live as the king, and the other would continue to live as the king's knight. This led to the separation of superior and subordinate in the palace office. "By the way, it's getting late. It's time for dinner." Artoria clenched her right fist and punched the palm of her left hand. Hearing this, Wu-ming and Merlin were speechless. Wu-ming looked at Merlin and said with his eyes, "Why didn't I realize that the king has such a big appetite before?" Merlin also looked at Wu-ming. Maybe it's because I pulled out the sword in the stone, maybe." Artoria had already walked to the door. She turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" "Villo Merlin, it's time to eat. Let's go or we won't have enough time." "You've eaten so much, it'd be strange if you had enough time." Wu-ming and Merlin shouted in their hearts. Okay. Coming. The dividing line of rice. After the meal, Merlin said, "I'm going to guide my new student." Then he left the palace. According to Wu-ming's understanding, Merlin's new student was the daughter of a noble. Other than his face that made him want to Wu-ming from time to time, Merlin's only flaw was that he liked to hook up with little girls. Is that so? I believe that if it's you, you should be able to guide that student well. This was the king who did not know the truth. Okay, my king. Let's not talk about Merlin for now. What do you think about the new knight order that I mentioned earlier? Wu-ming laughed to divert the king's attention. I think it's a good name. Right, how about we call it the Knights of the Round Table? Artoria blushed and said. My king, did you think of this name after seeing the round table that we ate at just now? The more Wu-ming thought about it, the more likely it seemed. The famous Knights of the Round Table had a name just because of a meal? How could that be? Right, I just remembered the round stone table that my foster father gave me a few days ago. My foster father meant that I could use that big table for meetings in the future. I thought that since we're using a round table, why don't we call it the Knights of the Round Table? Artoria looked like she was taking responsibility and did not want to eat any more. Okay, my king. I'll trust you this time. But that table is okay when there are not many people. It's a bit small when there are too many people. Well, we can build a big round table in the future. We'll use this one first. Artoria blushed. Yes, Lia is the best. Wuming patted Artoria's head again. Sup? Didn't you say that we have to maintain the relationship between a king and a knight? Why are you like this? Artoria cried. Didn't you say that we don't have to maintain the relationship between a king and a knight when there's no one around? Sure enough, it's more comfortable this way. I'm not used to being a loyal knight. Wuming stretched and said. You're just Lia's lover. I'm the king now, not Lia. Please respect me. Artoria's face was full of shame and anger. Is that so, my king? Wuming smirked. Wait, what are you doing? Ugh. Seeing Wuming's face getting closer and closer, Artoria panicked. Finally, the two faces met. Artoria's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that her first kiss was gone just like that. Wuming only kissed her lightly and left immediately. What do you think, my king? I respect you very much. Wuming continued to smirk. In the end, Wuming was still moved by the young girl in front of him who he had watched grow up. Although it was somewhat difficult to say it out loud as he was almost 30 years old, it didn't matter. Anyway, as the root dragon of the long-lived species, Wuming wasn't even a baby at 30 years old. Besides, Wuming wasn't the kind of person who procrastinated. If he liked someone, he would want to be together. Of course, Maeve's situation was special. Wuming only treated Maeve as a little sister who lacked love. Alright, let's get down to business. Looking at Artoria's blushing face, Wuming felt that he should give Lia some dignity as the king. After saying that, he went straight to his office. As expected, the king is still a little girl now. She's still a long way from King Arthur, who was good at war. Wuming thought to himself. Artoria, who was still blushing, calmed down and followed him to his office. What I mean is, the knights can come from different countries and even have different faiths. The meaning of the round table is equality in the world. All the knights of the round table are equal and partners. There is no difference between the round table and the round table. Everything is for the king and for Britain. Wuming told her the definition of the round table that he knew before. After all, it was better not to change history. Besides, the definition of the Knights of the Round Table was really good. However, when Wuming thought that he did not change history, history had changed a long time ago. Knights of the Round Table, huh? As expected of the Silver Dragon of Britain. You think differently. I was just thinking. Ahem. Artoria seemed to have realized that she almost said something wrong. She coughed. What are you thinking? Wuming smirked again. Ahem. Just like what you think. Artoria glared at Wuming. That's what you think for now. If there are any changes, we'll talk about it later, Artoria said seriously. Yes, my king. Wuming's expression also became serious. After all, even if they were lovers, there was still a hierarchy when it came to important matters. Besides, Wuming respected Artoria's position as the king. After that, the two began to talk about other things about Camelot. The king was also growing up slowly. Chapter 16. The banquet lasted until nightfall. After everyone left, Wuming asked the maids to leave and helped the drunk Artoria to her room. You said you can't drink anymore. You must be drunk. Wuming sighed. Artoria saw that it was Wuming who was helping her, so she leaned her body against him. In the end, it was Wuming who was holding Artoria in his arms and moving forward little by little. I didn't drink that much. I'm so tired. What? My head hurts. Artoria rubbed her head against Wuming's chest. Was it because Wuming didn't wear his silver armor today? Wuming shook his head. Wuming waved his hand and a few lune runes appeared. Wuming put his hand on Artoria's forehead. Do you feel better, Lia? Wuming used the lune rune to purify her. Much better. Artoria opened her drunken eyes. At this moment, there was only sobriety in her eyes. By the way, Vi, did you secretly use the lune rune on yourself? How come you're fine after drinking so much? Artoria looked at Wuming angrily. Wuming laughed and patted Artoria's head. Now that's an adult, little Lia. I'm the king. Don't hit my head. Yes. As they were talking, Wuming and Artoria arrived at Artoria's room. Let's go in, Lia. I've talked to Wire. You just need to talk to her. Why are you calling her Wire? You sound so close. Seeing that Artoria was angry again, Wu Ming patted his face and laughed. She promised to keep it a secret for you. All right, don't be jealous. Let's go in. I'll stay here tonight. What's wrong, Vi? Is something going to happen? Artoria asked seriously. Nothing. I'm just worried that some maids or knights might come by and eavesdrop on us. Of course it was a lie. What really worried Wu Ming was Morgan Le Fay. He was worried that the woman would do something on Artoria's wedding night. Just in case, Wu Ming decided to stay at the door. All right, but if anything happens you have to call me, Artoria said. Artoria said worriedly. How could she not see that Morgan Le Fay was acting strangely today? Although her sister Wang had always been strange. All right, I know. Let's go in. Tomorrow is the first meeting of the Knights of the Round Table. Wu Ming pushed Artoria into the room. After closing the door, Wu Ming quickly moved his hands in the air. Lines of Lune runes appeared in the air. Then, a large number of Lune runes were attached to the walls of Artoria's room. The whole room was sealed, including the windows. Phew. Wu Ming took a deep breath and took out the armor from the Lune rune. He put it on with magic. However, he did not wear a helmet. Now, the Lune rune on Wu Ming's body had been turned into a golden tattoo that looked like a dragon's head. It was tattooed on Wu Ming's right arm. This noble phantasm was a support noble phantasm that did not have any actual attack power. The name of the noble phantasm was Dragonist. The documents that Wu Ming submitted to Artoria were also kept in Dragonist. Now, everything that Wu Ming had was stored in Dragonist. It was safe and convenient. Noble Phantasm was one of Wu Ming's greatest weapons. A safe and convenient independent space like this was not something that anyone could have. Wu Ming fastened X-Silver, Meteor Silver, to his waist and activated Yggdrasil, to turn it into a silver arm and put it on his left arm. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and waited for Morgan Le Fay to arrive. The moon slowly rose. When the moon was in the middle, the lights in the corridor were extinguished by the wind outside the window. After a while, Wu Ming opened his eyes. Logically speaking, there should be knights patrolling the palace at night. However, it was completely dark and there was no one around. Obviously something was wrong. Wu Ming used his mana to sense the surroundings in Artoria's room. He could not sense anyone in the room or around him. Wu Ming also sensed the strange atmosphere around him. Illusion. Wu Ming was shocked. How could I be affected by an illusion? This is not the era of the gods. There shouldn't be any illusions that work on me. Wu Ming closed his eyes and used his own mana to stimulate the power of the will in his mind. Ugh. Wu Ming groaned and opened his eyes. The scene in front of him changed back to the previous corridor. The lights were not blown out and were still burning. However, there was an additional figure in front of Wu Ming. Your Highness Morgan Le Fay, what brings you here so late at night? Wu Ming wiped the golden blood from the corner of his mouth. He also used his mana to check Artoria and Guinevere's room. Oh, I see that Mr. Villo is still guarding the king and queen's room. I was worried that you might be lonely, so I came to see you. Morgan Le Fay smiled. I'm fine. If you don't have anything else to say, you should go to bed early. Wu Ming said calmly. All right, Mr. Villo. I'll take my leave now. Good night. Morgan turned around and left. Wu Ming watched Morgan Le Fay's figure disappear around the corner of the corridor. Wu Ming did not expect Morgan to leave. Of course, Wu Ming did not believe that she was here to visit him. That woman would not do something so boring. After checking Artoria and Guinevere's condition, Wu Ming pulled himself together and started his night watch again. It seems that I have to find a way to train and use my mental power in the future. Wu Ming was sure that Morgan used a kamikaze illusion on him. It was not that Wu Ming did not believe Morgan, but Wu Ming knew her too well. The person who knows you best is your opponent. This sentence was not without reason. Wu Ming guessed that Morgan might have used a kamikaze magic tool. Not to mention that kamikaze magic was lost. Even if it was, Morgan Le Fay could not. No, with her talent, it's not impossible for her to learn one or two kamikaze magic. Wu Ming rubbed his chin and thought. I just don't know what he did tonight. I just don't know if Mordred will be born. Morgan did not succeed in meeting King Arthur. Wu Ming was sure of this because even if she used spatial magic, the Lune rune would react. Wu Ming used the 18 primordial lune. Wu Ming did not believe that Morgan could avoid the primordial lune's magic. Forget it. I'll deal with whatever comes my way. I'll just take it one step at a time. Slowly the sun rose. Chapter 17. Not long after the sun rose, Artoria pushed open the door to her room. Queen Guinevere came out with her. "Villo, did anything happen last night?" Although it was a question Artoria asked with certainty. Obviously Artoria trusted Wu Ming. She believed that even if something happened he would be able to handle it. "I'm fine. It was a peaceful night." Wu Ming shook his head. Although he did not sleep last night, Wu Ming was fine. "Well, since it's daytime, why don't you take a nap, Lord Villo?" Guinevere asked from behind Artoria. "That's right, Villo. You should take a nap to avoid any mistakes at work." Artoria was also concerned. "It's fine. When I was traveling I didn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. One night is nothing." Wu Ming shook his head. To be honest, Wu Ming once found a giant egg by accident. After eating it, he was chased by a monster for 3 days and 3 nights. The egg was the monster's child. In the end, Wu Ming had to jump off a cliff and stay in the water for half a day before he was able to escape the monster's pursuit. Now that I think about it, it was really dangerous. Wu Ming mumbled. "What?" Artoria was confused. Nothing. Alright, let's go eat. The chef should have made breakfast. After breakfast, we still have the first nights of the round table meeting. Wu Ming quickly covered it up. "You're right. Let's go, Guinevere," Artoria said to Guinevere, who was behind her. "Yes, my king." Guinevere smiled. The moment he smiled, Wu Ming and Artoria were stunned for a second. Then they realized what was going on. "Guinevere, you're so beautiful." Artoria's face blushed as she complimented. This made Wu Ming stunned. Could it be that Artoria wanted to turn the act into reality and become a lesbian? However, what Artoria said next made Wu Ming lose his composure. No wonder the Villo was so infatuated. This time, Guinevere didn't say anything. He just looked at Wu Ming with a slightly red face. "Cough, let's go and eat." "It won't taste good if it gets cold," Wu Ming said immediately. Oh, let's eat. Don't let the food get cold." Artoria's eyes lit up. She wanted to go to the dining room immediately. Wu Ming smiled helplessly and dragged Guinevere to follow her. After dinner, Artoria went to prepare for the meeting. She asked Wu Ming to escort Guinevere to the library of the palace. It was Guinevere's request. According to Guinevere, she had loved to read since she was young. She had basically read all the books in Liao Dequan's territory. After arranging 2 maids for Guinevere, Wu Ming went to the round table conference room. Ever since King Liao Dequan brought the giant round table here, Artoria immediately asked Merlin to use magic to move the table to a large empty room. She named the room the Round Table Conference Room. Wu Ming pushed open the door and found many people sitting around the table. Wu Ming glanced around and found that almost all the current knights of the Round Table were here. Wu Ming walked to Artoria's side. As the first knight, Wu Ming naturally sat next to the king. Lancelot sat on the other side. After Wu Ming took his seat, Artoria glanced at everyone in the room and began to speak. In general, she wanted to save the people, save Britain, unify Britain, and drive the invading Saxons out of Britain. In fact, this was a mobilization meeting. Soon it was noon. "Well, that's all I have to say. Let's go and have dinner." Artoria stood up as she spoke. "Yes, Your Majesty." Everyone shouted in unison. Wu Ming was sitting on a big rock in the yard of his house with his eyes closed. Ever since Wu Ming fell into Morgan Le Fay's illusion, Wu Ming began to cultivate his mental strength. The best way was to ask Merlin for advice. As a half-nightmare, Merlin had unimaginable mental strength and magic power. Naturally, he also had a way to cultivate mental strength. In response to Wu Ming's friend request, Merlin immediately told Wu Ming how to cultivate mental strength. He also taught Wu Ming for dozens of days. Now Wu Ming was cultivating his mental strength. A strange wave was emitted from Wu Ming's body. It gave people the feeling that as long as they stood in front of Wu Ming, they would be completely seen through. Wu Ming continuously extended this force until it was 5 meters away. Then this force began to shrink until it was completely close to Wu Ming. Then Wu Ming slowly floated up. This was Wu Ming's way of using his mental strength, telekinesis. This was a method that Wu Ming accidentally discovered. It could be used to move things. Because Wu Ming's mental strength was more solid than Merlin's, Merlin suggested that he try to develop telekinesis. It could also strengthen his mental strength and increase his resistance to illusions. Because his mental strength was unusually solid, Wu Ming's telekinesis was more suitable than other people's. Bam bam, a knock came from the door. Wu Ming slowly landed on the rock and opened his eyes. "Come in." The one who walked in was a knight with a resolute expression. "Oh, it's Guy. Is my king looking for me?" Wu Ming asked when he saw the person. "Yes, Sir Villo. My king is looking for you. It's about the war. Ever since Guy joined the Knights of the Round Table, he was dragged to the palace by Wu Ming to be the palace's butler. According to Wu Ming's understanding, Guy was an excellent knight in all aspects except for his inability to control his mouth. Got it? I'll be right there. Wu Ming jumped off the rock and walked to the door. Guy wanted to move to the side to let Wu Ming walk in front. Wu Ming patted Guy's shoulder and said, I told you to just call me Villo in the future. Don't call me sir. Why are you, Gawain, Aguin, and the others so stubborn? Wu Ming said earnestly, Please forgive me, Sir Villo. I will change in the future. Gawain and the others have said that dozens of times. Forget it. You can call me whatever you like. Wu Ming shook his head and said helplessly. Guy also smiled faintly. After that, Wu Ming and Guy went to Artoria's office. To be honest, because of magic, the current Britain was very similar to 1,000 years in the future in many aspects. For example, this office had floor-to-ceiling windows, colored silk, mahogany desk, mahogany bookshelf, and marble floor. Wu Ming switched to straw paper when he came to Britain not long ago, replacing the parchment paper. While Wu Ming was sighing, Artoria spoke. Wu Ming, I'm going to conquer the Saxons in the north of Britain immediately. Artoria's expression was not very good. Did something happen? Wu Ming asked. Take a look at this. Wu Ming took the straw paper from Artoria. The more Wu Ming read, the worse his expression became. Although it was not as bad as Artoria's, it was still very serious. It's up to you, my king. Wu Ming read the paper and handed it to Guy, who was standing on the side. Wu Ming's words meant that he agreed. Guy passed down the order. Gather the whole army. The target is Fort Decrez in the north of Britain. Guy, who had finished reading the paper, received the order with a gloomy expression. Yes, my king. Chapter 18. 3 days later, Artoria, in her armor, stood in front of the assembled army. Everyone, the Saxons have disturbed our homeland and committed many heinous crimes. Now, we are going to drive them out of our homeland and protect the people of Britain. Drive out the Saxons. Protect Britain. Wu Ming raised his sword Silver and shouted. Drive out the Saxons. Protect Britain. Everyone raised their weapons and shouted. Pass my order, march. Under Artoria's command, the army began to march towards the Decrez fortress in the north of Britain. Because the Decrez fortress was not far away, Artoria only took half a day to reach the nearest town to the Decrez fortress, the city of Lai Ku. The lord of this town was called King Lai Ku. Ever since the Anglo-Saxons had taken possession of the fort of Decrez, King Lai had been troubled every day. If the Saxons continued to invade, King Lai Ku's territory would be the first to bear the brunt. As the lord, Lai Ku would definitely be killed by the Saxons. After all, this was what the Saxons did when they invaded Britain. If it wasn't for the fact that the Decrez fortress was the only way to connect the north and the south of Britain, Artoria would not have brought her army here so quickly. Of course, the Saxons' actions also irritated Artoria. After Artoria settled the soldiers and knights, King Lai Ku invited Artoria to the city lord's mansion. Artoria sat on the city lord's seat with Wu Ming and Lancelot behind her. King Lai Ku, who was standing in front of Artoria, smiled apologetically. King Arthur is young and promising. Behind you must be Lord Villo, known as the Silver Dragon of Britain, and Lord Lancelot, the Knight of the Lake. Both of you are very talented. All right, King Lai Ku, hurry up and tell me the specific information about the enemy. Artoria frowned and said unhappily. King Lai Ku also knew that he had angered the king in front of him. Considering that he still needed the king's help to deal with the Saxons, he began to explain the information about the enemy. After all, the information Artoria received was not complete. She still needed information from the local tyrant to supplement. Before Lai Ku could finish his story, Artoria suddenly yelled at him. Get to the point. Artoria's shout scared King Lai Ku. After all, Artoria had the blood of the red dragon, so her aura was a lot stronger than the others. Wu Ming shook his head in his heart. Lai Ku Wang's words were really nonsense. He was actually telling the information from the beginning like he was telling a story. Moments later, Artoria left the mansion with Wu Ming and Lancelot, leaving behind Lai Ku Wang, who was in shock. After returning to the camp, Artoria summoned the knights and began the first pre-war meeting. Of the enemy? Calm Artoria Ku of the Decrez fortress. With Wu Ming's strategy, Artoria decided that she would personally lead the team to face the enemy head-on. He secretly sent Wu Ming to form an assassination team to infiltrate Decrez fortress. Artoria did not care about assassination. She thought that it was not in line with the way of the knights. But under Wu Ming's persuasion, Artoria agreed. After all, the Decres fortress was built on the side of a mountain. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Even if the Saxons could not defeat Artoria, they could still defend the gate. After all, the Saxons were a group of warriors, not knights. At night, Wu Ming led 5 soldiers personally selected by him. They were all experienced assassins. With the help of Wu Ming's Lune Rune, they entered the Decres fortress through the cliff next to it. Although the Decres fortress was called a fortress, it was actually a town. It was just that the walls of the town were very strong. When Wu Ming and the others saw the miserable state of the Decres fortress, the 5 soldiers immediately lost their composure. On the wide streets, not a single resident could be seen. The barbaric figures of the Saxons were everywhere, and large amounts of blood could be seen on the ground. There were even cases where the Saxons would drag people out of their homes and assault them, all because the Saxons were in a bad mood. Wu Ming quickly led the 5 soldiers into an uninhabited house. As for the original inhabitants, Wu Ming guessed that they had been killed by the Saxons. The 5 soldiers almost exposed themselves when they were agitated. In fact, Wu Ming only chose 5 soldiers because their families were in the Decres fortress. They had rushed over when King Arthur announced the formation of the Knights of the Decres. Because they were not strong enough, they were assigned to the barracks. That night, Wu Ming ordered the 5 soldiers to scout out the Saxons. On the other hand, he wanted them to go to their homes and see if their families were still there. The next day, only 4 soldiers returned. Their expressions were not good, and Wu Ming even saw tears in the corners of one soldier's eyes. As for the one who did not return, Wu Ming did not believe that the Saxons would be able to discover the assassin. According to the 4 who returned, the one who did not return witnessed the scene of his parents being killed by the Saxons. In order to prevent his sister from being humiliated, he rushed out and killed her with his own hands. He also killed the surrounding Saxons. Because he had been exposed, the soldier personally charged into the Saxons that had gathered and died without a complete corpse. Wu Ming sighed and did not say anything. Wu Ming combined the information gathered by the 5 soldiers on the Saxons' distribution. After careful calculations, he set up assassination targets and escape routes. That night, the Saxons lost a few squad leaders. 3 days quickly passed. During the day, Wu Ming's group of 5 continued to gather information on high-ranking officials. At night, Wu Ming's group continued to assassinate. Artoria led troops to attack the Saxons, but the Saxons naturally closed their gates. This was because on the first day they had been beaten by the Knights of the Round Table and the Camelot soldiers. On the 5th day, after the Saxons lost almost all of their generals, the remaining squad leader immediately ordered them to retreat from Fort de Clays. After retreating, the Saxons left behind a few remaining soldiers and began to massacre the residents of Fort de Clays, burning down the houses. Wu Ming's 4 soldiers could not take it anymore and charged into the enemy ranks. Wu Ming also furiously joined the battle. In the end, the remaining Saxons were all killed, and Wu Ming was the only one left. Wu Ming laid out the 4 corpses and opened the gates of Fort de Clays. Wu Ming did not find the body of the 5th soldier. At this point, King Arthur used only 5 days to take back Fort de Clays, which was known to be easy to defend and difficult to attack in Britain. This battle was known as the Battle of Fort de Clays, and it established the beginning of King Arthur's unification of Britain. At the same time, King Arthur stripped King Lai Ku of his power, and Lai Ku was sent to the guillotine amidst the cheers of the people of Lai Ku. Chapter 19. It had been 10 years since Declete's Blitzkrieg. After 12 major wars, King Arthur had driven the Saxons out of Britain. At the same time, the sword in the stone, Caliba, the invincible golden sword, had broken the code of chivalry in order to save the life of a knight. Because of that, the knight felt extremely guilty and volunteered to search for the Holy Grail that could grant wishes to restore the broken sword in the stone when the war was over. Accompanied by Soundless, Merlin and Lancelot, Artoria received the star-sacred sword Excalibur and the sacred sword scabbard Avalon from the Lake Sprite. Moreover, Artoria was blessed by the Lake Sprite and could walk freely on water. This solved the problem of Artoria's inability to swim. After all, Artoria couldn't appear as a woman. She would be exposed if she tried to swim. What surprised Wu Ming was that the Lake Sprite had also given him a jade pendant, which could be of help to Wu Ming. Wu Ming later realized that wearing this jade pendant could reduce the negative effects of his dragon attribute, so he had been wearing it ever since. During this time, the number of knights of the Round Table had increased to 150, which was just enough to fill the Round Table. At the same time, Wu Ming also met the traitorous knight, Mordred. He was wearing a white armor with red stripes and he had a hoarse voice. Wu Ming always felt a strange connection with the traitorous knight whenever he was close to him. It seemed that Mordred could feel it as well. Because of this, Mordred often spoke ill of Wu Ming. Regarding this connection, Wu Ming vaguely guessed something in his heart. At this time, Artoria was not in Camelot. The Silver Dragon, or Wu Ming, was in charge of guarding Camelot. In the early days of King Arthur's conquest, some nobles and kings ambushed Camelot when Artoria was leading her army to battle. Fortunately, Camelot's soldiers managed to hold them off for a while, allowing Silent Wonder to use Exsilver to protect Camelot as soon as he returned to Camelot. By the way, Exsilver's noble phantasm was a pillar of light that shot up to the sky. It was similar to Gawain's Excalibur and Artoria's Excalibur. Since then, Wu Ming had been stationed in Camelot by Artoria to protect Queen Guinevere and the city of Camelot. As for the nobles and kings who attacked Camelot, Artoria was determined to eliminate them one by one. She told Wu Ming that, even if we keep them alive, they will be a disaster. For the future of Britain, we should get rid of them. In the backyard of the palace, Guinevere, who was in her 20s, had become even more beautiful. She was taking care of her flowers while Wu Ming stood beside her. Master Villo, do you think these flowers are beautiful? Guinevere did not turn around, but Wu Ming could still feel her smile. They are very beautiful. Then why don't you pick the flowers you like? Guinevere was a little sad. I like them. But as a knight, I should not think about that. Is that so? As long as you like them. Guinevere turned around and smiled. This country is at peace, Guinevere said cheerfully. If I'm not mistaken, yes. Wu Ming was a little worried. Don't worry, Lord Varon. With the invincible Silver Dragon of Britain and the incomparably valiant King Arthur, there will be peace. I hope so, Wu Ming mumbled. The more peaceful it was, the more uneasy Wu Ming was. In fact, Wu Ming had not seen Merlin for a long time. He could not contact Merlin either. Wu Ming guessed that Merlin might have been sealed away by Morgan Le Fay in Avalon, a fantasy land far away from the mortal world. Wu Ming had warned Merlin, but it seemed like it was useless. Artoria left Camelot to find Merlin. Morgan Le Fay. I hope you can behave or I will take you away before I leave. During the banquet, everyone was celebrating the unification of Britain and the arrival of peace. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was thinking about what Artoria said to Wu Ming today. Why? You should leave now, Artoria said. Yes, Britain is at peace. The spell on my body reacted a little. When Wu Ming was summoned and signed a contract with King Yusef, a layer of magic spell was added to Wu Ming's body. As long as King Yusef's goal was achieved, the spell would activate and send Wu Ming back to his original place. However, Wu Ming was attached to this place. Wu Ming looked at Artoria, who had not changed at all in 10 years. Wu Ming could not help but sigh. It seems that I have completely gotten used to the identity of a Villo Lia. Then what is your real name? Wu Ming. I will call you Ming from now on. Also, this thing, please keep it. Wu Ming was shocked when he saw the thing Artoria was holding. Wait, Lia, isn't this Avalon? Why are you giving it to me? Seeing Wu Ming's slightly anxious eyes, Artoria smiled. Because it is at peace. I need you to keep it for me temporarily. Because you said that Avalon will be lost. But what if I take it with me when I leave? No one knows how long the spell on my body can last. Then during this time you will stay close to me and protect me. She finished recalling. Sigh. Wu Ming sighed. Sure enough, I am still not good at mental activities. Then he shook his head and drank his wine. After the banquet, Wu Ming was walking to his room in the palace when a maid walked over. Sir Villo, the king invites you to meet in the back garden to discuss something. Wu Ming frowned but said after thinking for a moment. Got it? You can leave now. After saying that, Wu Ming walked away on his own. But the moment Wu Ming left, he did not notice that the maid's eyes emitted a faint purple light, like an illusory smoke, mysterious. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was walking into a trap that was designed for him. Chapter 20. Wu Ming followed the maid's instructions and arrived at the designated location in the backyard of the palace. Then Wu Ming saw Artoria sitting on a chair. Wu Ming walked up and asked, Lia, is there something you need from me? Of course, there is. Suddenly, Artoria turned around and crashed into Wu Ming's arms. Wu-Ming immediately raised his eyebrows and jumped back. Who are you? Yes, the other party was not Artoria. When the other party spoke, Wu-Ming sensed something strange. When the other party jumped into Wu-Ming's arms, Wu-Ming was already prepared to retreat. But Wu-Ming was still a step too late. Wu-Ming could clearly feel a faint dark aura wrapping around him. Wu-Ming looked at Artoria, in front of him, whose face he couldn't see clearly, and his expression froze. Lord Villo, it seems that you still haven't recognized me. The other party smiled with a little pride. Could it be? You're Morgan Leafy? Wu-Ming said in a surprised tone. The other party's temperament, figure, hair color, and voice were all very similar to Artoria's. That was the effect of high-level magic, but Wu-Ming could still see that the other party's original body was related to Artoria. Apart from Morgan Leafy, Wu-Ming couldn't think of anyone else. Lord Villo, long time no see. The other party's body was surrounded by magic, and the other party's figure changed. From the magic fog, an adult version of Artoria walked out. It really is you, Morgan Leafy. Wu-Ming didn't expect Morgan Leafy's real appearance to be so similar to Artoria's. If Artoria's hair reached her waist and her breasts developed again, she would be exactly the same as Morgan Leafy. Lord Villo, don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being such an eyesore. Morgan Leafy smiled charmingly, and a sheepskin scroll appeared in her hand. This is my summoning scroll. No, that's just a replica. Yes, the scroll in Morgan's hand was very similar to the scroll that Merlin and King Wuxia once used to summon Wu-Ming. The reason why it was called a replica was that Wu-Ming did not feel his blood on the scroll, and the real scroll was in Wu-Ming's hands. A stream of light surged on Wu-Ming's arm, and an ancient-looking sheepskin scroll appeared in his hand. Are you trying to send me away, Morgan Leafy? Ha, as expected of Lord Wu-Ming. Also, the darkness aura on your body has already wrapped around you. This thing is something that I obtained with great difficulty. Even if it's you, you won't be able to get rid of it in a short time, Morgan Leafy said with a complacent smile. Suddenly, a sword light slashed towards Morgan Leafy. Morgan Leafy hastily dodged, but the sword light cut off a few strands of her hair, causing them to flutter to the ground. No matter what tricks you are playing, as long as I can get rid of you before then, all your tricks will be useless. Wu-Ming's eyes turned red as he wielded the sacred sword of Meteor X Silver, once again slashing at Morgan Leafy. This won't do, Lord Villo. You should obediently leave. Morgan Leafy's finger moved, and a technique was instantly shot out. At the same time, the black aura within Wu-Ming's body suddenly erupted, imprisoning Wu-Ming. Ugh. Wu-Ming maintained his sword-slashing posture, and suddenly became motionless. In the next moment, a mouthful of golden blood spurted out from his mouth. PFFF. Morgan Leafy promptly made a decision, and prepared a scroll that had already been opened, staining it with Wu-Ming's blood. The imprisonment on Wu-Ming's body was removed, but the black aura still did not disappear. Wu-Ming knelt on one knee, leaning on his sword as he looked at Morgan Leafy with resentment. Hateful, Morgan Leafy, just you wait. Hee Lord Villo, then I'll be waiting. Morgan Leafy instantly activated the reverse summoning of the scroll, and threw it at Wu-Ming. When the scroll was half a meter away from Wu-Ming, it suddenly activated, and a magic formation appeared on the surface of the scroll. A suction force appeared from the magic formation, as if it wanted to suck Wu-Ming in. In fact, after the scroll sucked Wu-Ming in, it would open a space-time channel, sending him back to his original era. Don't even think about having your way. Wu-Ming began to resist, but the black aura within his body played its role, unceasingly eroding Wu-Ming's 4 limbs, 5 viscera, and 6 bowels. Wu-Ming's whole body was bleeding, and blood was gushing out from his armor. Roar. Wu-Ming's eyes had already turned into scarlet dragon pupils, and his shouts had already turned into dragon roars. Wu-Ming's armor began to disintegrate. Pieces of armor fell to the ground, making muffled sounds. Wu-Ming's body began to change. Dragon scales slowly grew out of his palms, a pair of dragon wings spread out from his back, and a pair of cuticles appeared on the top of his head. At first glance, Wu-Ming had become a monster. Roar. A muffled and painful dragon roar echoed throughout the palace. Many people, including Artoria and Guinevere, heard the roar and rushed to the backyard of the palace. Vi, is that you? Artoria quickly put on her clothes and ran toward the dragon roar. Guinevere sped up as well, running at a slower speed than Artoria. Lord Villo, please be safe. Because Wu-Ming was struggling to resist the influence of the space-time suction, and because of the black gas that Morgan Leafy had obtained from somewhere, Wu-ming, this young dragon of origin, could no longer maintain his original form and began to gradually turn into a dragon. At the same time, his rationality was gradually disappearing. This was also the reason why Wu-ming had never transformed into a dragon. Wu-ming knew that with his current abilities, he wouldn't be able to resist the enormous power of the origin dragon, after transforming into a dragon, and would lose his mind. He didn't expect that he would be tricked by Morgan Le Fay today. Roar. Morgan Le Fay. Le Fay. Roar. Wu-ming rushed toward Morgan Le Fay with a spear in his left hand and a sword in his right hand. However, Morgan Le Fay did not move at all, as if victory was already in his hands. Bang! A large sword that shone like a lake under the moonlight blocked Wu-ming's path. Let go. Wu-ming said in a hoarse and intermittent voice. You are Lord Villo. Lancelot did not expect that the monster-like person in front of him was the British silver dragon Villo that he respected the most. Let go. No. Please calm down. Lord Villo, do you know what you are doing? She is the king's sister. Lancelot shouted. I want to eradicate the hidden danger for Arthur. Wu-ming rushed forward with his spear and sword. Because it was Wu-ming, Lancelot could only keep defending. Your Highness Morgan, please leave this place quickly and find the king. Knight Lancelot, Lord Villo was cursed by a black-robed person in order to save me. He is now unconscious, please stop him. Morgan Le Fay cried. I know, please leave quickly or I will not be able to stop Lord Villo. Lancelot didn't ask why Wu-ming and Morgan Le Fay were here. It wasn't that he didn't want to ask, but that he couldn't in this situation. Morgan Le Fay nodded and left. When Wu-ming saw that Morgan Le Fay was about to leave, he instantly exploded. After a series of dazzling attacks, the Knight of the Lake's armor was covered in wounds. Sir Villo, please calm down. Lancelot resisted with all his might. Bang dash. Lancelot didn't pay attention and was sent flying by Wu-ming. Soon after, Wu-ming instantly arrived behind Morgan Le Fay, who was about to leave, and slashed out with his sword. Wait. Just then Artoria and Guinevere arrived. Just as Silver was about to hit Wu-ming, the suction force of the scroll reached its maximum, and Wu-ming was sucked into the dimensional passage. Root. Roar. Finally, the dimensional passage closed and the scroll fell to the ground. After that, according to the legends of King Arthur, after King Arthur unified Britain and drove out the Saxons, King Arthur's strongest knight, the British Silver Dragon, sacrificed himself to save King Arthur's sister, the court healer Morgan Le Fay, from a black magician's curse. He was eroded by black magic and turned into an evil dragon, which was then sealed by King Arthur himself. After that, King Arthur was so heartbroken that he repaired the broken armor of the British Silver Dragon every day. He sent out a large number of Knights of the Round Table to search for the Holy Grail and rescue the British Silver Dragon. During this time, King Arthur's queen, Guinevere, was discovered to have betrayed the king and fallen in love with someone else. A large number of King Arthur's knights unanimously petitioned to have Guinevere burned at the stake. Lancelot, who was known as the Knight of the Lake, saved the queen out of love. While saving her, he accidentally killed the Knights of the Round Table, Gareth and Gaholes, causing the Knight of the Sun, Gawain, to hate him. After Guinevere became a nun and Lancelot fled to France, Gawain requested to pursue Lancelot. Out of morality, King Arthur led an expedition to France. King Arthur left behind Knight Mordred, who was trusted by King Arthur. After King Arthur refused to acknowledge him as his descendant, Mordred already had thoughts of rebellion. During King Arthur's expedition, he spread the rumor that the king was dead. He united many knights who were disappointed in the king and proclaimed himself king. After King Arthur heard this, he immediately returned and fought Mordred to the death in Camlin's Hill. In the end, King Arthur released the Holy Lance and killed the traitorous knight Mordred. However, King Arthur was also heavily injured by the traitorous knight Mordred and did not have long to live. During this time, Lancelot asked about it and came to rescue, but was stopped by the Knight of the Sun, Gawain. Gawain was hit by the enemy on Camlin's Hill and suffered an old injury during the battle with Lancelot. In the end, Gawain died on Camlin's Hill. In the end, the only knight left, Bethel, threw the Excalibur, which was King Arthur's sword, into the lake 3 times according to the king's order. In the end, Bethel and Lancelot died alone, Guinevere became a nun for the rest of her life, and King Arthur was sent to a fantasy land by the Lady of the Lake to wait for a future crisis in Britain. Arthur's dynasty was destroyed. Chapter 21. After Wu Ming was transported into the space-time tunnel, the changes in his body became more and more obvious. His rationality also disappeared bit by bit. In the end, he began to attack the space-time tunnel without restraint. Coincidentally, Wu Ming in his origin dragon form could destroy space-time. As a result, the space-time tunnel, which wasn't very sturdy to begin with, was completely destroyed by Wu Ming. It was also due to the influence of the space-time tunnel that apart from the items in Dragonist, Wu Ming's Holy Spear Yggdrasil and Holy Sword X Silver were also affected by the space-time tunnel and vaguely entered the area where the space-time tunnel was broken. Wu Ming instinctively made a prompt decision and swallowed the Holy Sword X Silver, Meteor Silver, which was connected to Wu Ming by blood. When the Holy Spear Yggdrasil, left the space-time tunnel, it also entered an unknown era together with Wu Ming. Then, there was a legend of a holy dragon that lived on top of a mountain in that era. On a mountain peak that was closest to the blue sky, in a man-made cave, a terrifying and holy dragon was hibernating. The strange thing was that this dragon's body was surrounded by wisps of black gas. The dragon's white scales were angular and filled with a silver-white metallic luster. The dragon horns on its head resembled a dazzling crown that shone brightly. Scorching dragon breath spewed out along with the dragon's breath. After an unknown period of time, the black gas disappeared and the dragon's breathing gradually stabilized. The dragon opened its eyes and its ruby-like eyes were particularly eye-catching in the dark cave. "I see. Have I become a dragon?" An ancient and deep voice sounded from the dragon's mouth. Yes, this dragon in the cave was the origin dragon Wu Ming that Morgan Le Fay tricked. Ever since arriving in this unfamiliar era, Wu Ming had completely lost his rationality due to the enormous power of the origin dragon, leaving only the nature of the origin dragon. During this period, the black gas in Wu Ming's body constantly eroded him. Wu Ming instinctively resisted this power and eliminated it. As a result, apart from the occasional predation, Wu Ming basically stayed in the cave that he opened up with his power to hibernate. Coincidentally, after completely eliminating the black gas, Wu Ming also restrained the enormous power of the origin dragon out of self-preservation. As a result, Wu Ming's rationality also returned. What the hell is this? Damn it, that bastard Morgan Le Fay. Wu Ming's huge dragon claw slammed on the ground, scattering dust and gravel. I don't know where Yggdrasil went. Fortunately, I swallowed X Silver. Although Wu Ming's rationality had disappeared, his memory was fine. Wu Ming clearly remembered swallowing the sword and losing the spear. Forget it, it's my noble artifact anyway. As long as I'm in this era, I'll definitely be able to find it. Let's take it slow and treat it as a long-awaited trip. Wu Ming stretched but realized that the dragon's body was not easy to stretch. I almost forgot that I've become a dragon. Looks like a monster's journey is about to happen. Haha, Wu Ming seemed to have thought of something and laughed happily. As expected of me. After completely adapting to a human's life and body, I can still be so happy after becoming a dragon. Yes, this should be me as the origin dragon. Wu Ming got up and walked towards the entrance of the cave. Whoosh. The noisy wind constantly whistled around Wu Ming. Swish. Wu Ming spread his huge dragon wings. Wu Ming's dragon wings were like a work of art. They were noble, gorgeous, and inviolable. Whoosh. With a flap of his wings, Wu Ming soared into the sky and flew into the distance. Wu Ming flew unscrupulously in the sky. Because he was a dragon, there weren't any beasts that didn't have eyes to attack Wu Ming. Feeling the whistling wind around him and looking at the spectacular scene on the ground, Wu Ming couldn't help but exclaim. This feels great. Ha ha ha. Wu Ming continued to make one movement after another in the air and never got tired of it. After playing for a while, Wu Ming saw a city. After thinking for a while, he flew down. The citizens in the city noticed a black dot approaching in the sky. They gathered together curiously until they realized that it was a giant dragon. Dragon. It's a dragon. Quick, everyone leave. The citizens ran away in panic. The soldiers also helped to command and report to their superiors. Wu Ming landed on the square in the center of the city. A huge wave of air rushed around. Whoosh! Many people who didn't retreat in time were thrown around. Wu Ming looked at the panicked people and the surrounding buildings. He wanted to see what era it was. In the end, after looking for a long time, Wu Ming could only conclude that it was an era earlier than King Arthur. He didn't know anything else. Child? Suddenly, a scream came from behind Wu Ming. At the same time, Wu Ming felt something crawling on his tail. Wu Ming looked back. It was a child of 2 or 3 years old. The child's mother seemed to have panicked because of Wu Ming's arrival, causing the child to run onto Wu Ming's tail. Wu Ming lifted his tail and moved it to his mouth. Just when everyone thought that the dragon was going to eat the child and the mother screamed in pain, Wu Ming rubbed his huge dragon face against the child. Wu Ming's rubbing made the child laugh. Wu Ming moved his tail to the top of his head. The child climbed onto Wu Ming's head and hugged Wu Ming's dragon horns, giggling. Everyone then realized that the dragon in front of them wasn't as scary as they thought. On the contrary, Wu Ming, who was accompanied by the child's laughter, appeared unusually sacred. May I ask, Lord Dragon God, can you return my child to me? The mother also saw that the sacred dragon in front of her didn't seem to have any intention of hurting or eating people, so she mustered up her courage and went forward to ask. Wu Ming extended his dragon tail and the child playing with the dragon horns on Wu Ming's head obediently climbed up. Wu Ming moved long way down and moved in front of the mother. Thank you for not hurting my child. Thank you. The mother hurriedly hugged the child and thanked him while crying. The people around them also heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed, but they still didn't let down their guard. After all, even if the dragon in front of them was friendly and sacred, they couldn't guarantee that it wouldn't suddenly go berserk. Wu Ming saw that the people around him were slowly calming down, so he directly opened his mouth and asked, "Can you ask your king to talk to me? I have something to ask him." Suddenly there was a deathly silence around them. The people didn't expect the dragon in front of them to speak at all. After all, dragons were a type of magical beast. They had never seen a magical beast that could speak human language. It was already surprising enough that it didn't hurt people. Honorable Dragon. Lord Dragon, we have already sent someone to inform His Majesty the King. His Majesty the King should be here soon. Please wait a moment, said a braver soldier. At this time a group of people came from afar. The leader was a man who looked to be in the prime of his life and had the temperament of a king. Wu Ming guessed that this should be the king. After he dismounted, the soldier who spoke to Wu Ming hurriedly ran to him and told him everything that happened just now. After the soldier finished speaking, he motioned for the soldier to leave and then walked to Wu Ming. Honorable Lord Dragon, I'm the Uruk King Lugal Banda of this city. May I ask why you're looking for me? Said the man named Lugal Banda. I want to form a contract with you, Wu Ming said calmly. What? Lugal Banda was stunned on the spot. Chapter 22. Soon, a few years had passed, and the name of the young ancient king began to spread throughout the Sumer region. As long as Wu Ming had nothing to do, he would follow the young king in the form of a shadow of faith. Watching the wise young king grow up day by day, Wu Ming found it hard to imagine that Gilgamesh would become a tyrant when he grew up. On the altar, in front of Hyunryong's statue. After the daily worship, the Uruk people left one after another. In the end, only the young king remained. All right, Hyunryong, the people have left. Come out and talk to me. The young king smiled like a well-behaved child. However, Wu Ming didn't think so. The stone statue began to emit a faint golden light. An illusory dragon shadow appeared on the stone statue. You're still as wicked as ever, little Gil? An ancient, dull voice sounded. Ah, what can I do? I'm a well-behaved child. Pure laughter entered Wu Ming's ears. Wu Ming shook his head. Let's go. Today is the spiritual peak adventure. The young king's eyes lit up. Is it the legendary spiritual peak Abyf Mountain that even the gods fear? Of course, the place I'll take you to will definitely be the best. Wu Ming tilted his head and said proudly. Then get ready. After that, Wu Ming began to chant. In the young Gilgamesh's slightly nervous and excited eyes, a gorgeous golden magic circle enveloped him. The light drowned Gilgamesh's eyes. When Gilgamesh put down his arm that was blocking the light, a tall mountain came into view. Is this the spiritual peak Abyf Mountain? The young king let out a joyful voice that a child should have. After all, this kid is just a kid. Wu Ming thought to himself. This place is amazing. Hyunryong, let's go up quickly. With that, Gilgamesh moved his short legs and began the great adventure of climbing the Abyf Mountain. Wu Ming floated in the air like a phantom, accompanying the young king as they moved up the mountain. Abba Fushin, you have to make things more difficult for the king, or she will show off in front of me again. After all, it was a spiritual peak. Wu Ming could feel the immense magical power contained within the mountain. After a brief exchange of magic power, Wu Ming took control of some of the things on the mountain and began to obstruct Gilgamesh. In the process of climbing up the mountain, the young Gilgamesh encountered many strange things. Falling rocks from the top of the mountain, circling eagles, entangling vines and charging wild beasts, all of which caused some difficulties for Gilgamesh. But in the end, Gilgamesh still reached the top of the mountain. Wah! The young king shouted to the sky, expressing the joy in his heart. Ah, Hyunryong, come and see, this is a spectacular scene. That's why this Abif mountain is called a spiritual peak, Gil. A small Wuming appeared and floated beside Gilgamesh. Okay, the adventure is over. Let's change back, Wuming said. Well, I haven't had enough. But let's go back, the good things should be left for last. The young king began his journey down the mountain. Wuming also disappeared. If the journey up the mountain was difficult, then the journey down the mountain was wonderful. Along the way, Gilgamesh played with cute little animals, collected wild fruits and collected shiny stones. It was a lot of fun. However, it didn't take long for Wu Ming to discover that a goddess had arrived. Did she come specifically to find Gil? No, that doesn't seem to be the case. Then what is she here for? Wu Ming didn't specifically tell Gilgamesh about the arrival of the goddess. After all, Gilgamesh was now on the side of the gods, although he would side with the humans in the future. Soon, the goddess and Gilgamesh met. Ah, isn't this Gilgamesh? What are you doing here? Facing the goddess who suddenly appeared, Gilgamesh was a little confused. Wu Ming appeared behind Gilgamesh. Facing this beautiful goddess, Wu Ming seemed to think of something. Goddess Ishtar, what are you doing here at Abif Mountain? Wu Ming's ancient and dull voice sounded. Oh, isn't this Hyunryong Sama of Uruk? Are you still accompanying the young king? I thought you had left long ago. I don't think Ruamat Ningsuan can restrain you. What, do you like to be a nanny? Or do you like the young king? The goddess called Ishtar by Wu Ming joked. Although it was an honorific, there was no respect in it. I don't need you to care about my business. Let your father come. In fact, when Wu Ming became the Hyunryong of Uruk, Wu Ming had contact with the Protoss in the Sumer area. Perhaps because Wu Ming showed his true form, which was the legendary dragon of origin, the divine King Anu was in awe of Wu Ming. This gave Wu Ming, who was not very strong at that time, an opportunity to pretend. He disguised himself as a very powerful legendary, origin dragon who was injured and needed faith to recover from his injuries. Therefore, the scene of Wu Ming scolding Ishtar appeared. You must be joking. I'm here today to see this spiritual peak. I won't disturb you and the young king. With that, she continued to walk up the mountain. I've long heard that goddess Ishtar is very brave. Today I see that it's true. Let's go, Gil, let's go back. However, Gilgamesh did not move. What's wrong, Gil? Wu Ming was puzzled. Gilgamesh should not have been charmed by the goddess. There's something wrong with that goddess's gaze, Gilgamesh said in a light tone. Something wrong? Yes, it's a gaze that looks like she's about to destroy a treasure. What you mean to say is, I think her target is this spiritual peak, Mount Abif. That's none of our business. Let's go. Although that was what Wu Ming said, he did not think so. Hyunryong, send me back to Uruk. I want to go back soon. I really don't know what to do with you. With a flash of light, Gilgamesh disappeared on the spot. Wu Ming, on the other hand, turned around and flew in the direction of Ishtar. If I remember correctly, there's a story in Mesopotamia. The goddess Ishtar destroyed Mount Abif because she did not like it. With every step she took, her divine might increased until she grasped the peak and pierced the heart of the mountain with her spear, causing the spiritual peak of Mount Abif to collapse completely. Trying to stop Ishtar's destruction of Mount Abif is really a vexing matter. Do I have nothing better to do? But, I do have nothing better to do. Ishtar, I'm here to stop you. Wu Ming turned into a stream of light and ran forward. Chapter 23. After sending off Gilgamesh, Wu Ming soon caught up with Ishtar, who was heading to the top of the mountain. After that, Wu Ming and Ishtar went down the mountain together. After watching Ishtar leave, Wu Ming deliberately set up a barrier to prevent Ishtar from going back on her words. After that, they returned to the Uruk Hyunryong stone statue. You're back, Hyunryong. The young Gilgamesh sat in front of the stone statue and looked at the vast sky. Yes, I'm back. I also successfully stopped Ishtar, but what happened, Hyunryong? The young king tilted his head and was unusually cute. Ahem, you'll know in the future. Now you have to start becoming stronger, Gil. Otherwise, you won't be able to protect the things you want to protect. Just like today, you can only rely on others. Yes, I know. The young Gil smiled innocently. In fact, the young Gilgamesh wasn't weak. Of course, this was only for humans. The young Gilgamesh was a child prodigy. Whether it was martial arts or wisdom, they were both extraordinary. But, in the future you will face all the gods in the sky. Without great power you won't be able to compete with them. Gilgamesh wasn't an idiot. He was naive now, but he wasn't stupid. For magic, you should continue to ask your mother for advice. For martial arts, I'll take care of it, but the stone statue that Wu Ming was attached to emitted a terrifying aura. If you don't take this teaching seriously, you'll die. The young Gilgamesh swallowed and nodded his little head frantically. After that, under the guidance of Wu Ming and Rimit Ningsuan, Gilgamesh grew rapidly. Time flew by quickly. After the usual Hyenryong ritual, the blonde, red-eyed, heroic queen sat in front of the Hyenryong statue. She just sat there quietly, looking at the vast and boundless sky without saying a word. The stone statue began to glow, revealing an illusory figure. What's wrong, Gil? Is something on your mind? Wu Ming looked at the heroic queen in front of him and couldn't help but recall the past. I actually didn't realize that Gil was a girl before. I'm such a big idiot. Sigh, it couldn't be helped. Who asked Gilgamesh to be so handsome and androgynous when he was a child? Besides, it was impossible for Wu Ming to watch Gilgamesh take a bath or go to the toilet. Nothing big. I just feel that the people are living too comfortably. Who are you? Do they lack the courage to face their fears? Come to think of it, they come to me whenever they're in trouble. Wu Ming pondered. The current Uruk people might not be able to survive the bull of the sky in the future, the 7-year drought. So, you want to be a tyrant? After hearing this, Gilgamesh's face lit up with an arrogant smile. I'm not a tyrant, I'm a tyrant. I'll take my leave first, Hyenryong. As he spoke, Gilgamesh stood up handsomely and walked toward the Uruk palace. After all, a perfect genius would definitely become a king when he grew up. As expected, during this period, the Uruk king Gilgamesh wantonly fought and accumulated wealth. Thinking back to Gilgamesh when he was a child, he was highly respected and admired by everyone. Although he was a girl, Gilgamesh was extraordinary, beautiful, and heroic. Most importantly, he was the ideal ruler of the people. The young Gilgamesh had the qualities of a king that were more outstanding than anyone else on earth: tolerance, deep thinking, justice, and virtue. All the passers-by on the street praised her, falling head over heels for her beauty. However, this was all a plot of the gods. In order to restrict the people, the gods created Gilgamesh, who was 2/3 god and 1/3 human. They made him a king and ruled over the ignorant people, making them peaceful and believing in them. However, after he grew up, Gilgamesh realized that the people lacked some things such as the courage to face their fears. Now that Wu Ming was here, it only increased the occurrence of this matter. Hence, Gilgamesh decided to create a storm to discipline the people instead of just being a king who ruled over them. The disaster of the people came. Gilgamesh had been bullying people and tyrannizing women recently. His character had changed from being wise, gentle, tolerant, and just to arrogant and domineering. Now he often called others bastards. How should he put it? This was something worth complaining about. The hero king Gilgamesh who called others bastards, 2/3 god and 1/3 human. Just kidding? Hence, one day Wu Ming sneaked into the dream of the sleeping Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh walked on a dark road with a bleak future. Is this my dream? Gilgamesh said. Yes, Gil, this is your dream. The huge Hyenryong appeared behind Gilgamesh. Oh, is this your real body, Hyenryong? Gilgamesh crossed his arms and said with interest. How is it? Not bad, right? Ah. Wu Ming's dull voice began to spread. Gilgamesh, who was frowning slightly, chuckled softly and said, Don't worry. Then what are you doing in my dream, Hyenryong? Today, I snuck into your dream to tell you about the prophecy I saw today. Secondly, I came to see if you have changed. Wu Ming stopped laughing and said, What prophecy? Gilgamesh said seriously. After all, it was a prophecy from his teacher, so he had to listen to it for the time being. This was what Gilgamesh thought. In order to prevent you from not focusing on suppressing the people, the gods made a humanoid weapon when you were young. Soon, this humanoid weapon will accidentally learn of your various atrocities and come to Uruk to stop your atrocities. His name is Enkidu. Enkidu, interesting. Then let him come. Let me see if the weapon made by the gods has the strength. After that, Gilgamesh turned and walked on the dark road. You will become friends with him. Gilgamesh, who was walking forward, stopped and turned to look at Wu Ming. Friends, I Gilgamesh don't need friends and no one is qualified to be my friend. Gilgamesh looked at Wu-Ming fiercely. But in Wu-Ming's view she was like a proud lioness. Oh, is that so, Gil? Wu-Ming said with a smile, deliberately lengthening his voice. Hey, you are my teacher, so we are not the same. Before he finished, Gilgamesh immediately turned and continued to walk. But before turning around, Wu-Ming still caught the blush on her face. It will be the only friend you recognize. This, when you see it, you will realize. Wu-Ming looked at Gilgamesh and said, Then when I see it, I will beat it up. Gilgamesh walked and said without looking back. Wu-Ming's huge dragon mouth opened and he smiled. As you wish. Gilgamesh's footsteps paused for a moment, but in the blink of an eye, he continued to walk. Although your future is full of fog, your goal is unwavering. You will definitely reach the end. Continue to walk. Before I leave, I will open a path for you as your teacher for 18 years. After that, the darkness around Gilgamesh's path gradually dispersed. Wu-Ming's huge dragon body also turned into specks of starlight, floating around Gilgamesh. At this moment she was like a battle goddess, heroic, beautiful and powerful. Chapter 24. After Wu-Ming snuck into Gilgamesh's dream, for a long time, Gilgamesh's behavior was slightly restrained. Although the people didn't notice, Wu-Ming did. After that, the Enkidu that Wu-Ming mentioned came to Uruk City. And because of Wu-Ming's words, Gilgamesh also began to pay attention to Enkidu. On this day, Wu-Ming was attached to a dragon-shaped puppet made by magic and flew into the palace where Gilgamesh was. Gilgamesh saw something come in, his body moved, and with a leap, he grabbed the puppet that Wu-Ming was attached to. This is Yunriyong? You're so carefree, not only do you not need to recover, you're still in the mood to play with puppets, Gilgamesh mocked. To the outside world, Wu-Ming announced that he was injured and needed to recover. What are you talking about? This is also a necessary lesson for self-cultivation. Look at my wings, how realistic the carvings are, and these claws. Wu-Ming, who was grabbed by Gilgamesh, began his speech. Stop, I don't want to know the structure of this puppet. Why did you come to this king today? Do you want to see this king become friends with Enkidu? Gilgamesh swung his hand and let go of Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming flapped his wings and flew in front of Gilgamesh. You're so violent, I don't remember teaching you to be like this. Wu-Ming quickly said when he saw Gilgamesh's fierce, ruby-like eyes. Actually, I'm just worried about you. I'm afraid you'll get hurt, so I'm here to make sure you don't go overboard. In fact, after Wu-Ming told Gilgamesh about Enkidu, Wu-Ming was worried that Gilgamesh wouldn't become friends with Enkidu, then the story would be messed up. Alright, even though the history of this world was different from the stories Wu-Ming knew, it was still not the same. But that wasn't the point, at least Wu-Ming didn't hate the god-made weapon called Enkidu. Wu-Ming was now almost able to use a bit of the power of the root dragon, so Wu-Ming decided that when the bull of the sky wreaks havoc in the future, he would deal with it. That way the gods wouldn't punish either Gilgamesh or Enkidu. A guy that I've never heard of could injure this king? Who do you think this king is? What a joke. Genryong, don't worry, this king is just going to beat it up and won't do anything to it. After all, this king is the Uruk hero king. Gilgamesh crossed his arms in front of his chest with an arrogant look. Wu-Ming looked at Gilgamesh's arms with a strange expression and muttered in a low voice. I didn't notice it before, how did it grow so fast now? What are you looking at, Hyunryong? Gilgamesh's face was slightly red as he turned his body sideways, and his arms began to cover his chest. Nothing, don't underestimate Enkidu later. After all, it was created as a god-made weapon to contain you. Underestimating it will cause you to suffer. Wu-Ming coughed and quickly changed the topic. I know, this king will be a little more serious later, just a little more. Gilgamesh's face showed an expression that said, I'll hit it a little more gently. Sure enough, Wu-Ming had already thought of Gilgamesh's awkwardness when he realized that he couldn't do anything to Enkidu for a while. Then I wish you good luck, Gil. The puppet dragon lay on Gilgamesh's head with a happy face. Hey, you can only lie there for a while, this king will go and meet that guy later. Yes, Wu-Ming found that Gilgamesh would only reveal her young girl's heart when she was alone with him. She showed the attitude of an ordinary person, not a king or a tyrant, noble, cruel, arrogant, and powerful. Wu-Ming didn't want to see Gilgamesh as a king, which made him think of Artoria. However, Wu-Ming knew that Gilgamesh was a real king, an impeccable one. He didn't want Artoria to abandon her gender and only protect her people with her sword. Gilgamesh wouldn't hide her gender. On the contrary, she would openly tell the people and lead them in two contradictory ways, which were full of warmth and cruelty. It had to be said that Gilgamesh was much better at being a king than Artoria. Artoria was only suitable to be a knight. Of course, this was only Wu Ming's personal opinion. No matter what, as long as they wanted to, Wu Ming would open a path for them. Wu Ming came back to his senses and cleared his mind. Looking at the busy streets and the worried people, Wu Ming said, "I think Enkidu will come back to you in the name of the people." Gilgamesh crossed his long legs, drank the wine and said with a smile, "Ah, then let him come. This king is worried that no one can entertain this king." Gilgamesh took a sip of the wine in the fancy wine glass and savored it carefully. "Hyunryong, do you want a sip?" Gilgamesh raised the glass and said to Wu Ming, who was on top of his head, "Forget it. This puppet doesn't have feelings. It doesn't matter if I drink or not." After saying that, Wu Ming seemed to have sensed something. He immediately flew up from Gilgamesh's head and landed on the table in front of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh also looked at the door. After a few seconds, a soldier came in from outside. "King, someone called Enkidu is provoking you outside the palace. He said that you are cruel and heartless. He wants you to change." Gilgamesh looked at the soldier. With just a glance, the soldier lowered his head even more. "Let him wait." "Yes," the soldier said and quickly ran out. Gilgamesh slowly savored the wine in his hand. He wasn't in a hurry. At this time Wu Ming spoke. "How cruel are you now? Look at that soldier, he doesn't even dare to look at you. That's just because he hasn't gotten used to my changes and is afraid of angering me. It'll be fine after a while." Gilgamesh put down the empty glass and stood up. "Okay, the wine is finished. It's time to let that guy called Enkidu know the name of the hero king." After saying that, he strode out of the door. "Don't be careless." "Shut up." Wu Ming smiled and shook his head. He also flew out of the window. On the street, Gilgamesh stood straight in the middle of the street with his arms crossed. His golden ratio figure was exposed. He looked at the opposite side with a mocking expression. In front of him, a person with long green hair and a face that resembled a young girl stood there. He looked at Gilgamesh with a serious expression. "Are you Enkidu? Are you the hero king Gilgamesh?" The two sentences that were said at almost the same time collided with each other, forming an invisible pressure in the air. "Ah, interesting. Let me see what you're made of, bastard." Chapter 25. However, this isn't the place to fight. Come with me. After saying that, she walked towards the stone statue. After all, this was her country, her territory. She couldn't afford to lose anything. After a while, the two of them met in front of the Hyunryong stone statue. When Gilgamesh and Enkidu arrived, Wu Ming had already transferred his consciousness into the stone statue. After the two of them arrived, Wu Ming used the Lune runes to create a barrier to protect the sacrificial altar from being destroyed. "Then let me ask you something. What are you here for? Are you here to teach me a lesson?" Gilgamesh sneered. "That's right. Let me teach you a lesson for your arrogance." Finishing his words, Enkidu stomped on the ground and shot forward, charging at Gilgamesh in front of him. Gilgamesh didn't want to be left behind and rushed towards him as well. Dong! The two of them collided and created a strong gust of wind that blew away everything around them. The huge Hyunryong stone statue shook slightly, but it quickly stabilized. During the confrontation, Gilgamesh looked into Enkidu's golden eyes. Gilgamesh saw understanding in those eyes, as if Enkidu had already seen through him. Gilgamesh couldn't help but be enraged. Gilgamesh exerted force and pushed Enkidu away. With a wave of his hand, golden ripples appeared behind him. Blades, spears, swords, and halberds that could be considered treasures slowly emerged from the golden ripples. Gilgamesh grabbed one of them and charged at Enkidu again, while the rest of the treasures shot out one after another. Their target was Enkidu. Enkidu saw the incoming swords, spears, swords, and halberds, as well as Gilgamesh, who was charging at him with a sword in his hand. However, he didn't panic. He only touched the ground with one hand, and in an instant, swords made of mud appeared from the ground. Enkidu grabbed one of them and charged at Gilgamesh. Bam 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 bam. One by one, the treasures collided with the treasures made of earth, creating sonic booms. Gilgamesh and Enki were also engaged in battle. Saber chi and sword chi swirled in the air. Slowly, Wu Ming's protection started to lose its effect. The Lune runes were violently destroyed and cracks appeared on the ground. "Ridiculous. You're just a piece of mud and pebble. How dare you compare yourself to me?" Gilgamesh seemed to have met an evenly matched opponent. At this moment, Gilgamesh's face was filled with shock and anger. Enkidu didn't say anything. Instead, he faced Gilgamesh's endless attacks. Bow, 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 bow. Gilgamesh and Enkidu's fight became more and more intense. Wuming, who possessed the Hyenryong stone statue, was speechless. Just like that, Gilgamesh and Enkidu fought on the Hyenryong sacrificial altar for an entire day. The sounds of swords clashing echoed throughout the Uruk, making the Uruk citizens very uneasy. Finally, the sounds of swords and sabers stopped. Gilgamesh stood tiredly. His clothes were badly damaged and couldn't cover anything. Enkidu was the same. His body was lacking in weight and his clothes couldn't cover his body. After all, the swords and sabers were made from Enkidu's own soil. After a moment, Gilgamesh looked at Enkidu and laughed happily. This surprised Wuming. Ha 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 ha. Gilgamesh lay on the ground while laughing. However, as if there was something supporting him, he slowly lay down. At the same time, a piece of white cloth wrapped around Gilgamesh. This is our last move, right? If we don't have anything to protect, we'll just end up with 2 more stupid corpses. Gilgamesh said with a smile. Then, how about we end it with a draw? Enkidu thought for a moment and said. Then he followed Gilgamesh's movement and lay down. But in the next moment, Enkidu felt a force supporting him from the huge stone statue. At the same time, a piece of white cloth appeared out of nowhere and wrapped around him. That must be Hyenryong. So gentle. After resting for a moment, Enkidu suddenly said. Won't you feel bad about using up those treasures? Gilgamesh lay on the slightly messy Hyenryong altar and laughed. What's the big deal? If the opponent is worth it, I'll even use up all the things in the Gate of Babylon. Is that so? You're interesting. Enkidu's clear voice said something that Garen didn't understand. Hearing the conversation between Gilgamesh and Enkidu while lying on the ground, Wuming suddenly had a wicked idea. Hyenryong's stone statue suddenly emitted a golden light. Gilgamesh and Enkidu subconsciously turned their heads away. After the golden light faded, 2 people appeared in front of the statue. After seeing the 2 people, Gilgamesh and Enkidu were stunned. Golden hair, ruby-like eyes filled with deathly stillness, and a face that resembled Gilgamesh's. If one were to say that these 2 were Gilgamesh's younger brother or elder brother, no one would doubt it. But, Gilgamesh, do you have a brother? Enkidu asked curiously. Gilgamesh, who was usually arrogant, actually blushed. Although his expression became angrier, it also became more alluring. Hyenryong, did you do it? Gilgamesh roared. After being roared at by Gilgamesh, the 2 people seemed to have woken up, and their eyes regained their vigor. One of them spoke. Haha, these are the dolls that I made earlier to make it easier for me to possess. I modified them just now to make these 2 dolls more realistic. Then the other puppet said, Don't worry. I saw that you 2 were tired from fighting, so I was going to send you 2 to the palace to rest. As he spoke, the 2 male versions of Gilgamesh walked towards Gilgamesh and Enkidu respectively. Hey, don't use my face. Wait, I'll just rest here for a while, I don't need you to send me, what? Before he could finish, Wuming picked up Gilgamesh. Of course, he was carrying him like a princess. At the same time, Wuming's other doll also picked up Enkidu. Compared to the noisy Gilgamesh, Enkidu was much more obedient. Look at Enkidu, he's so obedient. You should behave yourself too. I don't need you to care about me, hurry up and put me down. Also, why are you using such a young doll, you old monster who has lived for who knows how many years? Although Gilgamesh said that he didn't want to when he heard the other Wuming's doll say that Enkidu was obedient, he also sat down and stopped making a fuss. However, his face became even redder. That's really sad. I'm not even a newborn in my race. Wuming's doppelganger controlled the 2 dolls and spoke as they walked. Enkidu, who was lying quietly in Wuming's arms, looked at the male version of Gilgamesh's face and thought, what a warm embrace, is this the legendary origin dragon? Accompanied by the noise of Wuming and Gilgamesh, Wuming, who used the Loon rune to hide Gilgamesh and Enkidu, returned to the palace with Gilgamesh and Enkidu. After that, the Uruk spread the news that Enkidu, who challenged the tyrant Gilgamesh, was recruited by Hyenryong as a sacrifice. The sacrifice Enkidu would be stationed at the Hyenryong sacrificial altar. Chapter 26. After crossing the Tigris River, Gilgamesh and Enkidu walked into a mountain called Zagros Mountain. The mountain was filled with cedar trees. Since Funbaba, the mythical creature of the forest, lived here, these cedar trees were growing very well. There were also signs of small animals moving around in the cedar forest. So this is the cedar forest where Funbaba lives. What a beautiful scenery. It seems like Funbaba lives up to its name as the mythical creature of the forest. Gilgamesh complimented without hesitation. Gilgamesh was never stingy with his compliments. Yes, I passed by this place when I was traveling. Although Funbaba is a mythical creature, Funbaba is not as ferocious as other mythical creatures. It only lives here quietly, guarding countless treasures. No one knows where it came from. I have never even heard of which mythical creature it is. Enkidu explained. Let's go. Let's deal with Funbaba first. We'll talk about the Hyunryong relic and the wood later. Gilgamesh said and started walking deeper into the forest. Enkidu hesitated for a while. He wanted to say something but gave up after giving it some thought. The two of them walked through the dense forest and arrived at an open space. They saw a gigantic mythical creature that was filled with the aura of the forest. The mythical creature was covered with green fur. Its head was like a deer's and its two huge antlers were like swords. Its body was like a bear's, but its gigantic body did not look barbaric. Instead, it gave off a special feeling of tranquility. That's a mythical creature? Gilgamesh said in disbelief. Yes, that's indeed the mythical creature of the forest, Funbaba. I was shocked when I first saw it. Although Funbaba is a mythical creature, for some unknown reason, Funbaba is not as ferocious as other mythical creatures. Enkidu explained to Gilgamesh. However, Gil, if our opponent is Funbaba, we can actually talk to it. Enkidu said thoughtfully. What do you mean? Gilgamesh asked in confusion. Funbaba has a gentle temperament. If you don't provoke it, it's actually a very easy magical beast to get along with. Because the fir forest is too lush, some people once got lost in this forest. They were all led out of the forest by Funbaba. This is also the reason why Funbaba is said to be the divine beast of the forest. Enkidu turned to look at Funbaba and continued. If it were me, I might be able to ask Funbaba to hand over the treasures and Hyunryong's relic. I might even be able to bring some fir trees back to Uruk. We can protect the forest's mythological beast, Funbaba, and also complete our mission. Isn't this the best of both worlds? After saying that, Gilgamesh looked at Enkidu happily. Gil, why are you looking at me like that? Is there a problem? Gilgamesh crossed his arms in front of his chest and said happily. As expected, Enkidu, you're becoming more and more like a human. Really? The reason why humans are called humans is because they have things that they need to protect. You're now racking your brains to think of a way to prevent us from getting into conflict with Funbaba for me and Hyunryong, and you're becoming more emotional. You can be said to be a normal person now. Gilgamesh looked at Enkidu's eyes that were more human and said in detail. Is that so, Gil? But why am I so calm now? Enkidu's eyes were slightly moist. Isn't that natural? Who would be happy to become a human? You're already a human. Then Gilgamesh stopped smiling. Your plan is pretty good, but if Funbaba doesn't listen to you, then there's only one way left. After saying that, he held Enkidu's hand and walked towards Funbaba. Get ready for battle. Funbaba looked at Gilgamesh and Enkidu. It had already noticed them when they entered the forest. Woo! Funbaba let out a low cry. My friend, do you still remember me? I'm Enkidu. Enkidu walked in front of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh and Enkidu's beautiful bodies seemed so weak in front of Funbaba. Woo! Funbaba nodded and stretched its head in front of Enkidu and touched Enkidu lightly. Enkidu also boldly touched Funbaba and smiled at Gilgamesh. Ha Gil, look at Funbaba, it's so cute. Come and touch it too. Really? Will it swallow you when you're not paying attention? Gilgamesh swallowed his saliva. At this moment, the hero king turned into an obedient girl in front of this natural disaster. Haha, you don't look like the famous hero king now, Gil. Oomph. I'll touch it, what's there to be afraid of? Gilgamesh said as he reached out his hand and touched Funbaba's nose. Chi! Funbaba suddenly raised its head and sneezed. This scared Gilgamesh so much that he jumped back. Ha Gil, you'll definitely itch when you touch its nose. Enkidu covered his mouth and laughed. Gilgamesh also relaxed his body and looked at Enkidu, who covered his mouth and laughed. My friend, you've really become a human. It seems that I don't have to worry anymore. After the farce ended, Enkidu and Gilgamesh told Funbaba the reason why they came here. Funbaba didn't disappoint Enkidu and said that as long as they passed the test it set up, they could take away the treasures it kept. As for the trees, Funbaba said that it could quickly make the trees grow without any side effects, so they could take it away at will. After that, Gilgamesh and Enkidu passed the test very quickly. After all, both of them were not evil people. Naturally, they passed the test set up by Funbaba very quickly. During the test of strength with Funbaba, the cloth that Enkidu wrapped around Wuming's sacred sword, X-Silver, was damaged during the battle and revealed the X-Silver. Funbaba ended the test in excitement and announced that both of them could take away the treasures it was guarding. Enkidu and Gilgamesh were confused about Funbaba's excitement. Could it be that Master Hyunryong knows Funbaba and that's why he reacted to the X-Silver? Enkidu said as he hugged the X-Silver. Who knows? Maybe that guy owes Funbaba money. That's why Funbaba became excited when it sensed Hyunryong's aura. Gilgamesh joked. Alright, let's complete the task that Hyunryong gave us first. We'll talk about the rest later. Later, Funbaba brought Gilgamesh and Enkidu to the treasure cave. Alright, let's get to work. Chapter 27. As he spoke, Gilgamesh placed one of his hands in front of him as if he was holding something. He clenched his fist and turned it around. After a series of mechanical clicks, a strange sword appeared in Gilgamesh's hand. Rather than calling it a sword hilt, it was more like a tool handle. Rather than calling it the heart of the sword, it was more like a cylinder with a precise structure. This was the key of the king's law that Gilgamesh had. It was one of the treasures of Babylon, the key to open and close the gate of Babylon. The gate was connected to the golden capital of Babylon, and there were a lot of treasures inside. Open Gate of Babylon. Following Gilgamesh's command, the key of the king's law began to move. The treasures in the cave were stored into the gate of Babylon one by one. Meanwhile, Enkidu was observing the weapons stored in the gate of Babylon to see if there were any weapons with X-Silver's aura. With meticulous manipulation, Gilgamesh and Enkidu took 3 days to store all the treasures into the gate of Babylon. However, the two of them began to discuss with a frown. Funbaba was lying on an empty ground, basking in the sun comfortably. Why isn't there any? It shouldn't be. Enkidu hugged X-Silver and leaned against Funbaba's stomach. Could it be that Hyunryong made a mistake? Gilgamesh leaned against a rock and rubbed his chin with one hand. I don't think so. After all, it's an important treasure of Master Hyunryong. There shouldn't be a mistake. After all, even Master Hyunryong knew that the noble phantasm was with Funbaba. Enkidu shook his head. As it heard its name, Funbaba, who was basking in the sun, let out a deep cry. Woo, sorry for disturbing you. Ugh. After coaxing Funbaba to sleep, Gilgamesh complained. Enkidu, why don't I see you being so nice to me? Gilgamesh looked at Enkidu with resentment. Alright, let's not make a fuss. This is the first mission Hyunryong-sama has given us. We have to complete it seriously. Hyunryong wouldn't set up a question that can't be answered. Since he asked us to come here, it must be here. Gilgamesh and Enkidu fell silent and began to think. The sun slowly moved to the center. At this moment, Gilgamesh seemed to have realized something and suddenly said, By the way, do you remember what Hyunryong said about the mission? What did he say? Isn't it to defeat Funbaba and retrieve the noble relic? Enkidu seemed to have realized something too. Are you saying that the key to the problem is Funbaba? Enkidu asked. Yes, think about it. Hyunryong said to defeat Funbaba, retrieve the noble relic, retrieve the treasure, retrieve the tree and return to Uruk. In other words, Hyunryong didn't say that his noble relic is in the treasure that Funbaba is guarding. It's on Funbaba's body. Gilgamesh and Enkidu looked at Funbaba who was sleeping soundly. But, where is Hyunryong-sama's noble relic on Funbaba? His body is so big there's no place to hide it. It can't be. It was eaten by Funbaba or... Gilgamesh finished Enkidu's sentence. Funbaba is the noble relic. Now that I think about it, it's possible. After all, Hyunryong-sama said to defeat Funbaba and retrieve the noble relic. There's a high possibility that Funbaba is Hyunryong's noble relic. This fits the reason why Funbaba suddenly appeared here. As if the mystery was solved, Gilgamesh and Enkidu let out a sigh of relief. The problem now is how to retrieve the noble relic. After all, it's impossible for us to kill Funbaba, but we can't let Funbaba follow us back to Uruk. Even if it's small, Funbaba might not follow us back. Gilgamesh facepalmed with one hand. That fella really knows how to create trouble for others. Why don't we go back and tell Hyunryong that his noble relic has become Funbaba? Enkidu looked at Gilgamesh and said. Sai, that's the only way. Okay. Gilgamesh agreed. No need. Suddenly, a young voice came from the dense forest. "Who's there?" Gilgamesh immediately opened the gate of Babylon on his back and aimed his sword at the dense forest. Enkidu stood up immediately and held the hilt of X-silver with both of his hands, aiming it at the source of the voice. After some rustling, a young man with black hair and black eyes in a linen shirt walked out. He seemed to be about the same age as Gilgamesh and Enkidu. As for Funbaba, it raised its head and looked at the source of the voice. Its eyes were filled with excitement. After seeing the face of the newcomer, it immediately rushed over. "Wait, Funbaba." However, what happened next shocked Gilgamesh and Enkidu. "Woo, woo, woo, good, good, good." Funbaba's huge head kept rubbing against the young man, and the young man kept stroking the Funbaba. It was a scene of a master and a pet getting along well. Could it be? "You're Hyunryong, master," Gilgamesh and Enkidu said in unison. "Yo." Gilgamesh Shaoen. Wuming stroked Funbaba's head and raised his hand to greet Gilgamesh and Enkidu. At this moment, Gilgamesh and Enkidu were really stunned. "So, you turned back into a dragon because of that guy called Morgan Leifi, and now you can control your ability and turn back into a human?" This was because Wuming told Gilgamesh and Enkidu the truth, and also told them his name. Therefore, Gilgamesh said with an "I'm very unhappy" expression. "This is unbelievable, Xian. Master Wuming." Enkidu also looked shocked. After all, Wuming's transmigration was not something that anyone could do. "About that, I'm sorry for hiding it from you for so long." Wuming smiled bitterly and kept apologizing. "Don't expect me to forgive you so easily. Thieves who lie to the king must be punished severely." Gilgamesh stared at Wuming with her beautiful eyes. However, this did not make Wuming back down. Instead, he looked at Gilgamesh with interest. "Alright, Gil, Master Wuming didn't do it on purpose. Let's put this matter to rest." "Nah." Enkidu smiled at the two of them and tilted his head. This made Wuming and Gilgamesh blush. After all, after Enkidu became a woman, her charm was too great. "So, is Funbaba your noble phantasm, Wuming?" Gilgamesh was still not used to Hyunryong's new name. She stuttered as she spoke. "Well, actually, I only found the exact location of my noble phantasm. I only found out that Funbaba was my noble phantasm when I secretly followed you guys here. No, strictly speaking, my noble phantasm and Funbaba had merged." After Wuming saw Funbaba, the connection between the noble phantasm and its owner was immediately connected. Therefore, Wuming finally confirmed that Funbaba was the noble phantasm. "Merged?" Enkidu said. "Yes, although I don't know, Funbaba is my Yggdrasil." After saying that, Funbaba rubbed Wuming again. "Alright, let's go back. Funbaba can continue to stay here." Wuming also hoped that his noble phantasm would be more flexible. Therefore, he decided to leave Funbaba in the fir forest for the time being. Gilgamesh and Enkidu looked at each other and sighed. They did not say anything. After all, they had been busy for a few days because of Wuming's noble phantasm. Wuming asked Funbaba to create a large number of trees. After that, Gilgamesh and Enkidu brought a large amount of wood back to Uruk. Meanwhile, Wuming transformed back into his dragon form and returned to the mountain palace. Chapter 28. After Gilgamesh and Enkidu returned to the Uruk with the wood, the news that the king had defeated the mythical beast of the forest, Funbaba, obtained countless treasures, and returned with a large amount of wood began to spread like wildfire in Mesopotamia. It was as if someone was deliberately pushing the news. Of course, it was Wuming who pushed the news behind the scenes. His purpose was naturally to create prestige for Gilgamesh. As for Wuming, ever since he returned to his stone palace in the mountains, he had been staying at home and never came out again. However, Wuming would occasionally observe the Uruk through the statue of Hyunryong. To be honest, although Gilgamesh's rule had become brutal, the living conditions of the Uruk had become better. On a very peaceful day, a slight earthquake suddenly occurred in the Uruk. Half a day later, a god descended upon the Uruk. Because it was the year 2600 BC, although it was the end of the gods' era, there were still gods descending. In the gods' era, it was very rare for gods to descend. However, the ceremony still had to be held. Just as people were preparing the ceremony for this god directly rushed into Hyunryong's temple of worship. Dong. Suddenly, this god broke a hole in the roof of the temple. "Hyunryong, come out." A voice filled with seduction was heard. "Goddess Ishtar, please don't make a ruckus in Hyunryong's temple. Also, please pay for the broken roof after you leave." As the chief priest, Enkidu slowly walked out from the temple. It's you? Where's Hyunryong? Hurry up and ask him to come out and pay for his debt. Ishtar angrily said to Enkidu while floating in the air on the legendary heavenly boat, Anna. However, Ishtar seemed to have recognized Enkidu. Lord Hyunryong is here. If you're sincere you can see him. If you're not sincere you can't see him. Enkidu seemed to hate Ishtar very much and his tone was very unpleasant. I don't care if he's sincere or not. If he doesn't come out I'll smash his temple. Ishtar looked like she was about to fight as if she was really going to smash this place. Who is it? Why are you so angry? Oh, it's Ishtar. What brings you here? A shadow appeared on the statue in the center, and Wuming temporarily possessed it. Hyunryong. But the hero king you mentioned was a boy. Why is he a girl now? Ishtar angrily roared as if she had been deceived. Ahem, I thought you would come to me earlier. However, I was also kept in the dark about this. I didn't know that Gilgamesh was a girl. After all, Gilgamesh was only 3 years old when you met her. The shadow flickered. Wuming guessed that with Ishtar's personality she must have gotten into some trouble that caused her to not pay attention to the Uruk for the past few years. To be honest, the past few years were just a nap for a god. Humph. Let me tell you, I've already destroyed Abifu Mountain. This is only the interest. I don't want anything else. I heard that the hero king is a peerless beauty. If you let her follow me and become my maid, I might consider forgiving you. Who do you think you are? You want Gil to serve you? Enkidu's little face was filled with anger. That's right, Ishtar. Don't even think about Gilgamesh. I won't allow it. The stone statue emitted a powerful wave, and in an instant, Ishtar was subdued by this wave. All right then. Just you wait. After saying that, Ishtar rode the sky ship horse Anna and left through the opening. With a flash of light, the shadow on the statue turned into a human figure and landed beside Enkidu. It seems that the earthquake from before was caused by the destruction of Abifu Mountain. Wuming said slowly. Lord Wuming, I heard that you've saved Abifu Mountain before. What was the reason? Enkidu asked curiously. I saved Abifu Mountain because of Gil. At that time I brought the young Gil to Abifu Mountain for an adventure. Because Abifu Mountain is a spiritual mountain, I asked it to take care of Gil when he went up the mountain. When he went down the mountain he met the goddess Ishtar. After realizing the goddess' intention, Gil said, Aren't you going to save him? Then, on a whim, he made an agreement with Ishtar. That's how Abifu Mountain was able to survive until now. However, it still couldn't escape the fate of being destroyed by Ishtar. Wuming said helplessly. Actually, Abifu Mountain was supposed to disappear more than 10 years ago. Judging from the current situation, it's actually the same. Lord Wuming, you don't have to be sad about this. Enkidu comforted him. Wuming was stunned. He smiled and shook his head. He wanted to say something but his mouth was suddenly stuck. Wuming suddenly thought of an idea. I'm so sad. I need a caring kiss to recover. This time Enkidu was helpless. Really, Lord Wuming, are you a child? Although he said that, Enkidu still tiptoed and kissed Wuming on the lips. This time Wuming was nervous again. After all, he only wanted to make a joke. He didn't expect Enkidu to really kiss him. However, Wuming wasn't the kind of person who wouldn't eat meat that was already in his mouth. Wuming hugged Enkidu, who was kissing with his eyes closed. This scared Enkidu so much that he wanted to retreat. However, Wuming's big hands directly hugged Enkidu. Enkidu was nervous at first, but then he wrapped his hands around Wuming's neck. The two of them started a French kiss in the hall. Wuming, I heard that Ishtar was here. What is she doing here? Suddenly, a clear female voice came from outside the hall. Wuming and Enkidu were so scared that they quickly separated from each other. Gilgamesh walked into the lookout hall. The first thing he saw was a blushing Enkidu and a nonchalant Wuming. Gilgamesh frowned and said, You guys are so strange. Did something happen when I wasn't here? Enkidu quickly waved his hands. However, there was still a lingering charm on his face that couldn't dissipate. How could that be? Right, Gil, why did you come to the lookout hall? Yeah, Gil, did you miss me? Wuming also asked. No, to be precise, he was teasing him. Who would miss you? You narcissist. This made Gilgamesh's face turn red. However, he didn't care about what Gilgamesh had noticed before. I saw a stream of light crash into the lookout hall. I instantly guessed that it was Ishtar. However, what is she doing here? Although she is the Uruk city god, she hasn't appeared for a long time. I thought that guy was dead. Gilgamesh said with an arrogant expression. Wuming bet that if Ishtar heard this she would definitely go crazy. Coughed, she's here to settle old scores. She used the incident at Abifu Mountain many years ago to blackmail you. She said that she wants you to be her servant. Wuming said indifferently. What? Who does she think she is? She wants this king to be her servant. I am the hero king. How dare she humiliate me like this? Sure enough, there are no good gods. Gilgamesh was angry when he heard this. He also glared at Wuming. What does it have to do with me? Wuming thought. Although Ishtar was scared away by me, she must have gone to find her father god. With the gods' love for Ishtar, plus the relationship between Enkidu and Gilgamesh, the gods will definitely take advantage of this opportunity. This time the Uruk may face a disaster. Wuming frowned and said. Wuming-sama is right. I even suspect that Ishtar came to ask for Gil because of father god Enkidu's idea. He wants to bring back Gil, who is the Sky Wedge. Enkidu's words were not unreasonable. After all, Enkidu's mission when he came to the Uruk was to bring Gilgamesh back to the gods. Well, I know. I will pay attention to the Uruk during this time. There is no other way. Just act according to the situation. Wuming looked at the stormy weather outside and said slowly. The Uruk is going to change. That you're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.